This podcast is brought to you by the team at New Zealand Trucking Magazine. Remember to get your hands on the latest issue from your favourite retailer or subscribe now at nztrucking.co.nz.
Keep on moving, the official podcast of New Zealand Trucking Media. Here's Dave McCoid and Murray Lindsay.
Here we go again, episode 6 of the Keep On Moving podcast as we look at trucking here. And you'll find we're going to be looking at it around the world as well. We're sort of in different locations at the moment. You can hear us all a wee bit boomy, but that sort of adds to the flavour. Now, my partner in crime, Dave McCoid, the editorial director of New Zealand Trucking Magazine. G'day, Dave.
G'day.
You had a nice break, I hope?
Yeah, no, had a great break. Yep, went away, did some trucking and in the top of the South Island. Generally, yep, fantastic summer. No, had a great time.
Now, we thought our first podcast was going to be bigger than a Kenworth. And this month, we feature the legendary Warwick Johnson, the man who, in many ways, Dave, pioneered literally moving big stuff, right?
Yeah, that's right. And probably because we've got Warwick on the show, Muzz, we might say bigger than a Mac, because one year was famous for 2 big R700 Macs that he had. So Keep On Moving, episode 6 is bigger than a Johnson House Removals Mac. And what a magnificent interview it is. It's just it's one that's jaw-dropping. It'll keep anyone interested in trucks and moving houses, and really the formative years of both heavy haulage and also trailer building in New Zealand. It'll just have you absolutely enthralled.
So what's this Trucking Towards a Better Future competition, Dave?
Yeah, we're in year 2 of Trucking Towards a Better Future, and it's a bit of a twofold thing. It's got an environment and a climate bent, you might say, and we're targeting it sort of at things become generally more efficient, then that'll probably be better for the climate. But we're not just looking for that, and where it all came from was my good mate Lindsay Wood, who's a environmental activist and comes from an architectural background. Actually, contacted me about the idea of tapping into the brains of the New Zealand trucking fleet as they roam around the country. And this happened, a good couple of years ago, and he sort of shoulder tapped me and said he was a bit cautious about what the editor of New Zealand Trucking Magazine might say about such a thing. And I was like, mate, I'm wearing boots and all, because we call it the truckernet. It's exactly the same as the internet. Truck drivers are dispersed through every corner of this nation, and they see everybody else's business. And I know through my, I'm the biggest truck driver groupie there is. And when you're in a group of them and they're talking about things they've seen, and they go, oh, bloody Bob could do it bloody more efficient than that if he did it the way Sid does it. But Bob never sees Sid because they're two different businesses. But truck drivers see the business world. And so what we're trying to do, tap into that trucker net of intelligence out there behind the wheel that sees so much commerce, and say, what have you seen that could improve the efficiency? And it could be something really small. It could be something really big, and of course, for me, the other sort of sideline benefit of it is, I'm always promoting the truck driver. My greatest heroes and mentors were all truck drivers, incredibly intelligent people, and so I want to promote, truck drivers as a community subset, because they're as worried about the next 50 years for their kids as anybody else, and they're not often heard because they spend so much of their time in such a small room delivering everybody else's future.
We're also talking in this podcast with people in Aussie. This is a new innovation. In Aussie, we've got Mike, we've got Will in England, and at the news desk of our little trucker magazine, of course, Shannon and Millie, plus Dave Ching is talking classic trucks, and it's a beauty. But first things first, of course, the beautiful noise is that the sound of a truck. And Dave, who was the winner? And perhaps put us out of our misery. What, in fact, was the truck?
Well, the winner was someone I've known for many years, and he popped up, and man, he almost nailed it bullseye. So Grant Schofield, just a truck buff extraordinaire, and works in the operations office at J Swap Limited, and he got the engine and the vocation. He said it's an X15 Cummins and it's a logging truck. And he said, I can tell that by the way the throttle's being feathered going up the hill. And I said, mate, you are onto it. But he had a couple of cracks at whose truck it was, but he never quite nailed that. And of course, the truck was Tutu and Raymond Manuel's mighty Western style Ruamoko, and it was carting logs out of the far east of the North Island, driven by the sublime Mr. Ray Feki, who just was virtuoso driver when we were down there.
And to make it easy this month, Dave, it's just engine and truck, right?
Yeah, Muds. We're just going to go engine on truck on this one because you'd be pretty special if you got the engine, truck, and whose actual truck it was. So let's just go. What's the engine? What's the truck? And we'll see if we can flesh out another 12-month subscription for the winner of that. No, the best thing to do is just send me an email at david@nztrucking.co.nz and please put in the subject line, beautiful episode 6, keep on moving, beautiful noise, and please put that subject in because I get thousands of emails a day and say you don't want to be lost in the crowd, so put in that subject line quite clearly, keep on moving, episode 6, beautiful noise.
How impressive are you? Thousands of emails a day. I am staggered.
Thousands.
Thousands of them. I think this is a good time to bring in a couple of our good friends, Gavin Myers, who's the editor of the magazine, and Carl Kirkbeck. I haven't quite worked out what he does, but he loves his trucks. And they're going to join us for a little segment called the Moot. And this time we're just going to discuss something that is very much trucking related, although it's Aussie based, Dave.
Yeah, that's right. So we had this idea for the 5-minute moot, which is this, we may have them from some time to time. Sometimes we may not have them. And it's just, an issue that comes up or something that pops up in the industry. And 5-minute moot to kick us off this month is PR that came out from the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator in Australia. And it was all about truck safety and teaching younger people who truck education, like around how to behave around trucks when they're going. And the boss of the NHVR, National Heavy Vehicle Regulator in Australia, Mr. Sal Tricito, said the campaign demonstrates how L and P licence holders can drive safely around trucks, including rules to follow when trucks are turning, stopping, and how to overtake a truck. The campaign is initially proactive and is designed to grab the target audience's attention and start important conversations around road safety. Fantastic concept, fantastic program. The moot is what they've called it. Don't hashtag UCK with a truck. So don't something uck with a truck. The thing with me is I just go straight back to what I was talking about before with trucking towards a better future. I'm a big truck advocate, and we sort of know that they can be a rough around the edges subset. But why do we have to play on that? Why not give it a real professional sounding catchphrasey name? I don't know. What do you reckon, fellas?
Yeah, I mean, you're dealing with Australians, though, Dave. I mean, I think that's probably the first. They tend to be that breed that it's all about shock. It's all about the sort of get a reaction and so forth, and it does get a reaction. There's no two ways about it. Yeah, it's also, I think, the generational thing, the whole hashtag thing. Certainly, they get it, have a bit of a laugh at it and so forth. But yeah, no, I see where you're coming from, man.
From an outsider's perspective, which is a good way of describing me, really, we are talking about it here in New Zealand. What sort of conversations went on in Australia? People saw it.
Yeah.
I mean, that was ultimately what it was about.
Yeah. But what's interesting, Muzz, is that if you have a look at the actual posts that they're putting out on social and all the wording around it online, is that what they've actually done is since those original press releases, they've replaced the hashtag UCK with MUCK. So it becomes don't muck with the truck.
Yep. I mean, the thing for me is like, okay, then it's sort of like, what was wrong with that from the start? If that was what the hashtag was blocking, why not just start? Because there's nothing wrong with Mark. For me, it's like they've started with something, they've got some reaction, and they've softened it down for the very reasons I'd like it softened down.
Yeah, you got to ask yourself, has there been that reaction? Has someone actually said something over there and said, oh, come on, that's a little bit un-PC and so forth, and they've, like you say, toned it down a wee bit. But that, I mean, historically, that's what they're like. They tend to be up front and go for the go for the confrontation and conflict. You just got to look at some of the history. Underarm bowling, for example. I mean, that got a good reaction. But
let it go,
no,
Carl. Let it go, mate. Let it go.
But no, but the thing is that it's as Gav just said. It's certainly got the look at it. We're talking about it here in New Zealand, and it's certainly got a good reaction, and we probably need something similar over here.
I was going to say, if you've got some thoughts, don't forget the same place. The same place Dave has 1,000 emails a day. Dave, it's trucking.co.nz.
Okay, that might have been a mild exaggeration. 980.
Well, that's the Moot. That's the Moot this time round. You've got a subject you like the troops to talk about. Once again, the 1,000 email box.
Oh, I'm never going to live this down.
David, New Zealand Trucking, nztrucking.co.nz. Now, one of the highlights from New Zealand trucking media in 2021 was the launch of the Little Trucker Down Under mag, which I saw in a bookshop at the airport, actually, right next to the current edition of the mag, which we'll talk about a bit later on. And it was great seeing it, because I hadn't seen it in living colour. It was great. Anyway, let's get an update from the editor, Shannon Williams, and our reporter, Millie McCauley.
Hi, everyone.
Shannon, response from the editor's desk. Little Trucker Down Under, it's your baby, issue 1, volume 1, number 1. How's it been?
Oh, well, the first issue went really well. Since it's been out to market, we've had a lot of feedback from the people who have read the magazine and the people who have contributed to the magazine. We've had people send through emails saying how much they've enjoyed it. We've had people come through our Facebook page coming and telling us how much they love it. One of the best things we've had is people sending us photos of them with their kids holding the magazine, reading it. So it's been really great.
And of course, it's demonstrated, hasn't it, just how difficult trucks are for kids nowadays to get to. And, it's almost been like something to grab and at last something on trucks.
Yeah, and I think the fact that it's focused on the kids, it's written by kids for kids. It's definitely something that is for them. So I think that is something really special that they'll have that they haven't had before.
Millie, you're our first sort of full-time, well, not full-time, but you know what I'm saying, about our first regular junior reporter on Little Truckers magazine. You're the daughter of a real live truck driver. Yeah. How was the experience for you? Did you enjoy it? Did you like the whole process? Was it fun?
It was definitely really good to be part of something that everyone has really wanted, as you're saying, Dave, a way to connect, the younger audience with the whole transport world, and to be part of that, it's been really cool and really fun to go out and talk to truck drivers and even go trips with my own dad and be able to share them with other people.
What's coming up this month, Millie? Where have you been? Have you got to give us away any secrets for the autumn issue that's not far away?
We do have a really cool Meet the Fleet coming up with APL Direct General Manager.
Oh,
so
cool.
I think that'd be really cool. That's Jake Lambert, and that will be really exciting, I think, because that's such a cool company.
Yeah, and so did you get to go there and meet Jake? And
I sure did. I went and we had a chat, and we even got a tour around the facility there at Hamilton. It was super cool.
Shannon, as Little Trucker Down Under is your first introduction to the magical world of road transport and trucks. How's it been for you from that aspect?
Yeah, really cool. So I haven't had much involvement in trucking before. The biggest I've known about it is my dad drove a truck when I was a kid. We got to go in there a lot sometimes. He was a furniture mover type of guy and had a big truck. So getting to know everyone in the industry so far has been really fun, and just the different types of trucks there are. And I think that's something readers will enjoy with the magazine, is that we've got a whole range of different types of trucks, different brands across Australia and New Zealand in there. And that's something I've enjoyed learning about. So I hope people enjoy learning that as well.
Fantastic. And of course, you touched on one of the really hot points for the magazine there is Little Trucker Down Under, which means it's us and our great friends across the Tasman, our Australian family. So we want the magazine to be across both countries, don't we?
Definitely. And I think that's a really good point to make, is that while we are very close to Australia, they're our cousins across the pond, across the Tasman, is that the landscapes over there are very different to New Zealand. So it's really cool to learn about and hear all these really cool stories about the different types of techniques and skills that you need to learn to be able to drive trucks in Australia and compared to New Zealand, because the environments are very different.
I'm a young kid. I've just heard Millie, or I've just seen her on the cover of the book, and I've seen the book, and I'm thinking, oh my, how do I get myself in front of this thing? So, Shannon, what do they do? How do they do it?
First, you have to love trucks. Second, you just need to get in touch with us. So you can, get in touch with us via email, or you can get in touch with us by our Facebook page. And just, if you've got a cool story to tell, would love to hear about it. Or even if you've just got some cool images to share, if you've passed a truck on the road, or you've been to somewhere that has some cool trucks that you've taken some photos of, would love to see them. So my email address is shannon@nztrucking.co.nz. Or you can check us out on Facebook. Just look up Little Trucker Down Under on Facebook, and you'll be able to find us.
Thanks so much, Millie. Thanks so much, Shannon, for coming on the podcast. And everyone can hardly wait to see issue 2.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Certainly such a treat having Shannon and Millie on the team, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a great job they've both done. I mean, Shannon's just grabbed hold of Little Trucker Down Under magazine, and she's really enjoying having a cover-to-cover magazine to look after of her own. Fantastic job as editor. Just such a great addition to the team. And of course, the kids like Millie McCauley just restore your faith in the future. Just so much energy and just wanting to get out there and do interviews and just, promote the hell out of the industry that she's been a part of, because her dad's a real life trucker.
Keeping thousands of companies at their most productive, the name Mitsubishi Forklifts by Sentra Forklifts has become synonymous with quality, reliability and value for money. Our distinctive green trucks can be seen at work sites and in warehouses all around the world, with Mitsubishi forklifts, reach trucks, order pickers, pallet trucks and more, all serving the backbone for some of the busiest and demanding operations around. Innovative design, cutting-edge technology and uncompromising quality are the standards that define everything we do. So if you are wanting short or long-term lease options, or to buy, contact the team at Sentra Forklifts, your Mitsubishi Forklifts dealer in New Zealand. Phone 0508 367 548 or visit www.mitforklift.co.nz.
It's the Keep On Moving podcast. Now it's time for our feature interview this week with Warwick Johnson.
Yeah, the book is called Prime Mover, The Remarkable Life of Warwick Johnson, and it is remarkable. I sat for an afternoon with Warwick a few Fridays ago and was just absolutely in awe of this man's life. He has been the boys' own annual Biggles adventure. He's looked on life and challenges with nothing but fun and adventure, and how can we tackle this? It's an awesome listen. Here we go. Warwick Johnson, the man. Here we are with Warwick Johnson. The book is called Prime Mover, The Remarkable Life of Warwick Johnson. For any self-respecting New Zealand truck buff, the name Warwick Johnson will need no explanation. A true pioneer of New Zealand's modern road transport history, with a slant on building transportation, obviously. His contact list is a who's who of those who were the cornerstones of both trucking and trailer building in our country. His own contribution extends well beyond that of merely transporting buildings and over-dimensional loads. His life has been one that is truly a boy's own adventure annual. Warwick Johnson, thank you so much for having us in your home today and for giving us a couple of hours.
Yeah, well, it's a lovely day today. It's not raining, and it's a real house removal day today. It's only Friday, so that's all right.
I want to start the chat with, I want to read the first paragraph of the dedication right at the start of the book. It says, first and foremost, this book is for all of the men and women who shared my life, work and adventures. You could say we collectively took the bull by the horns and lived for the day-to-day challenges. In our final years, our bones may creak and groan, but those memories endure forever. And then opposing that is a photograph of Warwick and his dad. And
carrying my share.
And the caption says, my father instilled in me the importance of carrying my share of the load. And so we start in 1933 with Dad Bert and Mum Hazel, and you're on the world and you're away.
That's right. Yeah, I was only a young fella, of course, and I don't remember much until I was about 4 or 5. I know I had an injury when I was 4. I slid off the roof of a V8 car, and the number plate pierced my eye. So I've been a one-eyed house removal guy all those years. Nobody ever knew that I had a bung eye, and I've still got a bung eye, but I don't tell people that. So that was really the start of things.
It's really interesting because your life's been punctuated at either end with pandemics and epidemics, because in your early life there was the polio, and now we've got COVID, isn't it? So you've had pandemics at both ends of your life.
I saw so many things and changes, and I learnt that you had to learn. Practical experience was the best learning curve you could ever have. And when you see something that somebody else did that was wrong, you buried that in your head because you had to know that there was something better to be had. And I think that I took on board the fact that the stress was the biggest enemy in life. And I think at an early age, the stress level was something I left behind. I didn't bother with the stress. I always looked about for today and tomorrow. All my life, and people say, don't you worry about that? I said, no, there's nothing to worry about. That was yesterday. Yeah. And a fellow will ring up and say, I've tipped a bloody house off. And I said, well, go and jack it back up again, put it back on. So it was no good crying over spilt milk, was it?
No, that's exactly right. And so your entry into house removals, even though it was a family business and Hazel's
I was the
dad
third
did it.
generation, and my mother's father, old Pop Jack, started in 1886.
And he was hugely influential, wasn't he?
He came up the Waikato River on a paddle boat and jumped off that. And a chappie said, well, what did you do? He said, oh, I'm a carpenter. He said, are you any good at pulling down a shed? So Pop did that. And that's sort of how the family went. And they had a very large piece of land in Hamilton East, about 7 or 8 acres, and that was where Pop built what's called the homestead, and that's where their yard was in McFarland Street. So then we move on to the generation of my dad, and Dad's father was a station master for looking after the trains, and they built the railway lines, and Dad ran away from home when he was about 16 or 17 from Matamata, and the reason he left there, Dad said he was sick of crushing up and boiling the acorns for the pigs. So he cleared out and came to Hamilton, and Pop and his guys saw him leaning on a fence watching them shift a building. And they said to Dad that was he interested, he could have a bit of a job, but there'd be somewhere to sleep and a bit of kai, but there'd be no money. But Dad said, that'll do me. And believe it or not, after being there for a year or two, when I look at the history, he met the boss's daughter, which was my mother, and he married my mother. So that was Pop's daughter. My mother was Hazel, and a fantastic lady. A change came in our lives when he won a building society ballot, and there was an acre of land with a very big old villa house right in the middle of Hamilton East, and the £2,000 ballot that he got was sufficient to buy the acre and the 5-bedroom house, but it was terribly overgrown. And the people that owned it, their sons had gone overseas into the military. And, of course, for me, I suppose you could say that's where we started to learn how to light a fire. And we used to have horrendous fires and burning all the trees and rubbish. And many a day I'd singe my eyebrows and my hair. But that was at an early age. I was only maybe 8 or 9, maybe 10.
Yep.
And
yep.
I think you learn the parables that you learn is something you never forget. My mother was an absolute saint. She was the in-between, my dad and her. If Dad was going to give me a hiding, Mum interfered. So she might have saved me the hiding. I used to say I had more hidings than hot dinners, but I was always in trouble doing something.
And your own entry into the world of the family business, the house removals, was a bit of literally a whirlwind, because you were on a farm when the tornado hit Hamilton.
What happened, the polio epidemic in 1947, and it closed our school. I was at primary school, and around about November, December, the school closed down, and as soon as I hit home, Mum said, you're going out onto a farm at Ruakahia, where they were friends of Mum and Dad. And believe it or not, of interest, that farm was right alongside the Ruakahia Aerodrome, where about 400 aircraft had come from the Pacific. And any spare minute I had, I used to sneak under the fence and jump in the planes and pretend to fly them. So that was about that. And then the bid came to go back to school, and around about February, March, April, the next year, I decided that I could probably go into the rural and be a farmer. And I wasn't interested. I had never even a thought of anything to do with building removals. By chance, it happened the day that I was leaning on a fence where I shouldn't have been, and the headmaster gave me 6 of the best. So I told him where I was going. I told him what I thought of him, and I didn't go back to school. I think I was only 13 or 14. I went home and told Mum I couldn't sit down. My arse was that sore. She put me onto a farm then at Matamata. So I spent 5 months of my time there until the 25th of August 1948, when the tornado roared through Frankton, Hamilton, and my dad was there shifting these mill houses that were sectional. 3 Arctic loads had just disappeared to Mamaku, and the only load they were standing in didn't tip over, but it smashed everything else. So Mum came and got me in the Model A, and that was my days of being a rural farmer. The old fella, Mr. Thirlwell, he said, "Boy, you pack your bag." Mum came in the Model A, and going home I thought Mum was pretty nervous and tetchy, but I learnt later that she'd never driven a car before, she never had a licence, and the Model A was a hard case thing anyhow. But so that was the 25th of August 1948. So you could say that was it.
That's where it all got started.
That's where it started. And I was as skinny as a rake, and but okay, I was okay. And the hardest part, I think, there, that I already knew so much, I probably knew more than the guys that Dad and his partner employed because of our previous years. Yeah.
And you had such great mentors and men to teach you.
Yeah, that was when in latter time, as I grew a bit older and I became more self-efficient, and the guys wouldn't listen to me because I was too young, and who the hell are you? What do you know about it? So I did have that problem.
Interesting. And of course, compulsory military training. You eventually got called up to do your bit.
That was interesting. I was 18 years of age and turned 19, and of course it was the 8th intake, and we all had to go to Frankton, get in a train and go to Pepakura. So there were 4 carriages there, but one of the wags had disconnected the wagon, and when the train took off, it left us behind. So there was a bit of kerfuffle. But when we got to Pepakura, we had the daylight beaten out of us because somebody must have rung up and told them we were a bunch of rebels. It continued like that. We marched into a big hall for uniforms and sandpaper clothing, and I was walking across the bull ring. I didn't know you weren't allowed to walk on the bull ring, but diagonally I was going across the bull room, and the sergeant major, being a POM, he yelled out and told me I was on charge, and he told me to double away and pointed to his hut on the side. Little did he know I'd already shifted 100 of those damn things, and I knew very well what it was about. The door on the side and the windows on the other side, so I ran in that door and out through the window and kept the line of sight so he wouldn't know me out of 800 guys. So that was probably my day in the army.
But one thing I did pick up from the army years in the book was it didn't take long for them to put you in charge of men.
Yeah.
And so there's a natural leadership thing there going on.
I don't know how that happened, but there was 16 of us in our half share of the hut, and there was room for a separate bedroom, and they gave me the job as a hut superintendent or commander or whatever you call it. And the guys, of course, were all fresh off the turnips, and I said to them, "Look, you guys, we've got to just buckle in. We're here for 90 days, and we've just got to make the best of it." And I said, "We've all paid tax." I said, "Let's get some of it back." And I said, "We'll do something about it. You wait and see." So within days of being there, the superintendent, or the guy that run the army outfit, was Major Fowler, and he found out I was a house removal guy, and he pulled me to one side, and before I knew it, I had a Land Rover with multi-pots of food, and my job was to shift these particular buildings. So I would hand-pick my guys out of whatever, and of course we'd spend time shifting the buildings rather than going on bloody point duty.
And you taught guys to drive.
Yeah, well, because being 19, I'd been driving trucks since I was about 16. Dad got a Chev truck, brand new, around about that time, 47, 48, was a 4-6-ton Chev. And Dad was used to the buggy, the horse and carts, and he was what I call a hopeless driver. So me being me, if I washed the truck and looked after it, I could drive it. So I did that. And one of the incidents happened that we were doing a job where we needed to go down to Roost Shipping and get sand. So I pulled under the hopper and filled the truck up with probably 3 or 4 metres of sand, pulled up alongside the office, and the manager his name was Jack Watts. "What do you got there, boy?" he said, leaning down, talking at it, and he wore big, thick glasses. I knew he was blind as a bat, but anyhow, I said, "Jack, I think I've got about 3 yards," and a bit of a delay. He said, "Doesn't look like 3 yards to me. If you say more like a yard." I said, "You must be blind, you silly chook." Anyhow, the reason was that if he had to pay on his docket book for 3 yards, he had to pay royalty and tax for the sand that he dug out of the river. So by only having a metre or a yard, you only paid for the royalty for a yard. So the rest of that job, every time I turned up as a 16-year-old with a truck with 3 yards of sand, it was just another yard. So so I learned how to drive a truck when I was 16, 17, 18.
Yep.
When the time come for my traffic licence when I was 18, the local cop was Darby Finlayson from the Waikato County. Rang him up and I said, I really need to have a bit of time. I said, you better come out. So he came out to the yard and he pulled up in his beaten up old bloody county car. And I don't need to test you. He said, I've been seeing you for the last 2 years. So he just sat down and wrote out the ticket. He said, what do you want? And I said, well, I need a licence to drive that truck. So that's it.
That's how that's...
So of course, when I went into the army at 19, I was fully versed in how to drive a truck. I knew all about that sort of a thing. And of course, the other guys were all fellas off dairy farms and from wherever they came from, generally from the South Waikato. I suppose by realising that I knew what I was talking about, it wasn't long before we were teaching these guys how to drive GMCs, how to change gears, and the GMCs actually were like brand new. They still had the fresh paint on them. They were beautiful trucks. So therefore, our 60-odd guys all got heavy traffic licences.
It set them up for life in many ways, didn't it? Yeah.
Never thought about it at those times.
Yeah, exactly. So getting back into, so you've done that, you've done your 90 days for the Queen, and you're in the army, and you're back.
It was a hard case day. I was on point duty, and I was probably about 20 or maybe 21, but it was the day that the Duke of Edinburgh and the Queen came to New Zealand for whatever reason. And I was on point duty at Ulster Street in Hamilton, and this Land Rover pulled up, and the driver said, "Oh, the Duke's here. He wants to talk to you. Any chance of a beer and a pea?" He said, "Oh, I have the pea first, but maybe the beer later." I said, "Well, okay, well, you jump in," he said. So I jumped in the Land Rover and took them down to our headquarters at Knox Street and up into the ramp into the building. And I said, "The toilet's down there. Do you need a hand?" He said, "No, I can manage." Of course, when he emerged out of that, I said, "Well, the beer cabinet's locked up." But I said, "Well, break the padlock." But I said, "You've got a sign on the door that you've pinched a bloody bottle of beer." So he did that. So once he had his pea and his beer, we went back to, and he dropped me off at point duty, and he probably told the Queen where he'd been. I don't know what he said, but it was quite an introduction.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on, before we go back, can you tell everyone about the flamethrower toilet?
We were the first arty platoon, we were called the transport section, and our job was to go ahead of the recruits. In this case, there was about 400 guys going to go to a place called Tihoi, which is on the western side of Mangakino, and in those days it was just scrub and rubbish and rabbits and hares. And so anyhow, we were there, and the deal was we had to establish the cookhouse and had to do the latrines, which was a piece of scrim on sticks, and we had a plank with about 7 holes that we hand-sawed cut in it so the guys could squat and sit. So I said to the guys who were digging the trench, and it was in sand, I said, "We'll dig outside the scrim," and I said, "We'll get that flamethrower thing that we had in the truck, we'll sit that." So anyhow, little be known, the guys that sat in there, because they were trying to hide, they didn't want to listen to anything else, and they were all sitting in there with their backsides, and so I lit this flamethrower that tossed the flame about 20 feet through the trench, and it let out a howl, and all these guys sort of realised that they were on fire.
Yeah.
But, I think you had to have a sense of humour, and I think I shared that with the guys, and I suppose you could say when you're a young fella, you were paying a third of your wages in tax, and I said to the guys, we've just got to get some of that back. So anyhow, in that same week, we ended up being at Moose Lodge at Rotoiti. And on our way there, but quite a while when you got 17 or 18 GMCs, and on one of the GMCs we had 7 Indian motorbikes, and they were going to be whatever. So when we got halfway at Ruwhakaitu, senior guys they were conscripted as who they were. They thought they were gun-ho guys. One was a school teacher, I don't know what the other fellow was, but they were lieutenants and all that, and I by this time was a corporal or a sergeant. So anyhow, they left us in the hay paddock with all these trucks and pitched the tents, and this is about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you can imagine a bunch of guys all fidgeting around us. I said, "Let's get these motorbikes off the truck, and we'll have a motorbike rally, and we'll peg out the side up the hill and around there," which we did. And of course we're in a hay paddock with the grass about 2 feet high, And so, of course, we pegged it all out. And one or two of our guys were actually motorcycle clubs, and they knew a little bit about it. So anyhow, we had a ball. We wrecked the 7 motorbikes. We chucked all of them back in the back. And of course, our 2 NCOs or seniors didn't end up coming back until it was dark. And come the morning, of course, so I got all the guys up and we pitched our tent and we buggered off because we knew we were going. And our 2 guys were still shicker in the tent. So you can imagine the farmer in the morning looking at his hay paddock because we'd stuffed it.
That's awesome. The book's called Prime Mover, The Remarkable Life of Warwick Johnson. I've got Warwick Johnson here with me. We're having a wonderful chat and an interview. And we're going to move back into, after the army, house moving. And your dad sort of retired and you went into business on your own, and then blow me down, he come back and against as opposition.
Yeah, what happened there in 1952, I suppose I'd been working with him for 4 or 5 years and it was all right. I never had an argument, but I could see that there was an opportunity. In Hamilton, there was 11 transit camps that the Americans had, and they were huts that were 28 feet by 10 feet. So in the old language, whatever, that's about 12 metres by 3 and a bit. And the idea was Dad had this trailer built specially to shift them. Too cumbersome, you couldn't get into the yard. And the opportunity for me, I spied a bus chassis sitting at the local Bedford people. It was an SB Bedford, 1952, with just a set of chassis rails and an engine. So I took it to the local Pomeroys, the bodybuilders, and I said, build a cab on it. And they had struggled to find the doors, so I said, well, take them off. Those dairy company trucks that got parked up there, they wouldn't miss a couple. So we ended up with the doors. We were able to build the cab on this particular truck, and the truck was a fantastic success. For 20 years, we drove that truck. It was absolutely outstanding. And being a bus chassis, it was terribly strong with a good low chassis. So I painted the truck blue. Our trucks were green, so I painted it blue. When Dad and Mum found out what I'd done, there was a bit of hostility, and the accountant arrived one morning about 7 o'clock, and I said, what the hell are you lost? And he said, no, he said, we're going to have a meeting. And I said, well, I've got things to do. No. Unbeknown to me, they had arranged to set up a company, and that was 1952, and they gave me, out of 1,000 shares, that'd be £1,000, I got £200, so I was in the money. So I became a shareholder. So move on, and we go to 1957, 58, and by that time we're doing those transit huts and all that, and through the ministry local was a guy called Ben Waters. Anyhow, he talked to Dad about shifting these buildings that were at Merrimurray. They had to go to Mangakino. And Dad told him, he said, we're not interested in that. He walked out the yard and he got on his push bike to ride away, and I waylaid him and I said, what's this you're talking about, the buildings? And he said, well, your dad's not interested. I said, well, why don't you talk to me? I must have been about 20, 21, and I told Dad what I'd done. So anyhow, it was 123 mile, I reckon £1 a mile, I'd be in the money. I went to the ministry up in Day Street and I signed a piece of paper that said I'm involved, and Dad got the pricker and he said you can have the company, which I took the company on. And of course it was a 2-year event to shift these 200 houses to Mangakino. So what happened, which was rather interesting, there was 200 of these so-called houses, and the idea was the ministry had set out a specification, and it didn't talk about tandem running, and I had that in my head that if I had the second truck, that my £1 a mile going to Mangakino for 123 mile, coming back with the second truck. So every time my speedo on my truck was actually my bank balance. The long and the short of it was I took on the contract and successfully did the job. Being successful, the money came through the till, and my dad and my younger brother Graham, unbeknown to my mother, he got another truck and trailer designed and built by Tids and Hawkins. The long and the short of it was I had opposition. I had my father and my brother Graham running along as Bert Johnson and Son, and when they'd asked Dad where I was, he said to be at Mangakino or Turangi somewhere, can I be of some help? So, of course, straight away the heckles on the back of my head, yeah, that was probably a bitter pill to swallow.
But you worked really hard until you were able to buy them out.
Oh, it was endless. And of course, I had a wonderful bunch. There were 3 other guys and myself, and by that time we were a real hardcore bunch of guys, and people would come onto the job and they'd say to you guys don't talk. And I said, well, we don't have to talk. We know each other. We know exactly what we're doing. That went on for some years, and in the end, I was so annoyed about my brother and what was happening, and I suppose I was the fit rat in the family, and I took my brother on to task. I said, well, I'm going to buy you out whether you like it or not. So I had a 10-acre block with a house in Hamilton, so I said, you could have that. I'll have your gear, which I did.
Of course, the era was such a fantastic era. There were so many big projects. There were dams. There was the Cowrail. There was the dam.
Exactly.
Matahina.
Yeah.
It was
endless. Out of Mangakino, the MDF that built the Mary Power Station, they took on the paper mill at Caxton at Cowrail. Chief there came to me and he said, Warwick, he said, we've got all that row of houses there and the 400 huts. He said, all that's going to Cowrail. Have you got a price? You got something in your mind? I said, well, it's going to cost you $1 or $2. He said, don't worry about the money. He said, I'm telling you, I want you to do it. So anyhow, tandem again. These houses were Keith Hay built, pre-builts that were sitting on it. Anyhow, there was 20, maybe 25 of those, and complete with furniture and all. We would jack them up and we'd end up in Cowrail the next day, and the people who were, all their furniture was in it and everything. So
didn't you have to put them on the train?
Probably back in the early days, and the stupid railway had a thing to do with licensing, and you couldn't get a permit to shift over about 30 mile, but because we had a building on that was, say, 25, 30 foot wide, the railway couldn't handle that. So we really were fortunate. We got a licence for the whole of the North Island for relocating transportable buildings or building material, which was really a fantastic plus.
Yeah. So it was the smaller buildings that went on the rail.
Huts that went on the rail. And they, when I put the pressure on the railway, they could only supply 4 railway wagons. No, 7 UB wagons. So they took 4 huts to each wagon. And so we roped them on, and the deal was that they'd end up at Cowrail, but they couldn't go through the tunnel. They couldn't do a lot of things, so they ended up in Rotorua, and we had to go and pick them up from there. By that time, we had 2 truck and trailers in our Bedford. We could shift about 17 or 18 huts in one go, and we'd arrive at Cowrail, and then we'd spend back to the railway yard at Rotorua and shift those other ones. So by and large, that's what we did.
So with the Keith Hay homes from Mary that went to Cowrail, were you able to do that overnight?
Actually, in those days, it was daylight. And
right.
When I say, daylight, we'd leave Mary at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We tried to work at we had a problem to get through Hamilton, so we had to deviate round through Rototuna and get back to our yard at Tamaheri, which was perfect for the spot. So we'd refuel. Our trucks were petrol, and then we'd leave about 4 a.m. in the morning, and we weren't supposed to, but it was the imperative to get out on the road and get cracking, and we'd end up going through Rotorua, through the back of Rotorua, through the Rotomar Hills and all up round through there. And of course, they'd never had buildings go through there, so you could imagine me we invented a chainsaw about that time, and going through Hongi's Track and a few places like that, we were very good at giving them a haircut.
Right.
And,
so what were you pulling them with, truck-wise?
It was rather interesting because I'd proven with Ross Todd Motors, they had the franchise for the international trucks. And way back when I got the Mary contract, I went to Ross Todd and I said, I've got a piece of paper here that says I've got 200 houses. I said, I haven't got any money, but I said, I need a truck. So Norm Todd, he was one of the directors, and he laughed and he said, let's have a look at the paper. So within 7 days, they had a brand new international there for me. He said, Warwick, try this, away you go. So that was the beginning of a fantastic friendship with Norm Todd and Jim Ross, the pair of them. They're a bunch of hard cases. So the international, they were petrol, and they used petrol at about 2 gallons of petrol. So every truck we had to have 44-gallon drum of petrol as well. So they were petrol was about 1 or 6 a gallon.
And so you were at a pound a kilometre. You were in the money.
Yeah, well, never thought about it, but different people said I'd go broke. But the fact that we were tandem running. Now, what I must say with that government contract, what it said, the Ministry of Transport had to provide the pilot. So that was okay. So sure, prior to that, Dad would use the Model A with a dunny door with a go slow wide loading and a red flag, and then the Ministry of Transport said that they had to provide the pilot. So that was all right. So we arranged for every other day at Mary to have a Ministry of Transport pilot. It took 2 years, and we tandem those houses out of Murray to Mangakino. We had the fantastic two-way radio supplied by Tate from Christchurch. It was the best thing that ever happened, because in those earlier days you had a two-way radio with crystals and the vibration on the truck. You could throw the two-way radio out the window. But the Tate one came up with a I describe it as like a lot of wires soldered onto a piece of cardboard, and bolted them in the truck, and they were absolutely fantastic. So then we had a pack set with a jumper leads we'd bolted onto the old Zephyr. We generally had worn out Zephyr cars as cop cars, and with the jumper leads we had a red light up on top of that sign that we screwed onto the top of the Zephyr. So here we go again. Here we are with a red light and the cop with our two-way radio, and he was our pilot. And all those 2 years, we never ever had an accident. Never ever. And the cop did it. Here's the other funny part. When we get to Mangakino, the cop was fairly well buggered, and, it was a slow journey in those days. So he'd don off his cop gear and he'd put his boots on, his old clothes, and he'd give us a hand for an hour or two. And, of course, there was always a few dollars passed, and it would be in pounds, shillings and pence. But the cops in those days were the same age as myself, and we were like a family.
Yep.
And they just loved it. They loved the fact that we shared the time.
Yeah, and you said in the book that the police in those days were terribly paid.
Yeah. Oh, incredible.
Between the Mary Kawerau and the Mary Mangakino for the dams, how many houses do you reckon? Houses and huts do you reckon you moved?
It went on like a snowball. It just got more and more, and the ministry kept throwing more jobs at me.
Yeah.
And of course, this is interesting to do with Turangi, and they came to me, and we'd already shifted the buildings that we took from Murray to Mangakino, those 200. We picked them up and took them to Te Teko and Matahina to doing the earth dam at Matahina.
Yeah.
So when that was finished, we bought all those, and they all came back into other hydro projects. They said to me, Warwick, this is Peter Armstrong and Johnny Benyon, and they were the seniors. And I suppose you could say I knew these guys. They said, Warwick, we're looking at taking Mangakino to Turangi. We're going to set up a set-up there for about a 15 or 20 years, and we want you to price the houses to go. In those days, the Western Access Road wasn't there. You can thank Hollyoak for that. He bought a farm around there, and he wanted a road to go around the western side of the lake, so it wasn't there in those days, so there was no way the houses out of Mangakino were going to go to Turangi. So I said that. I said, hey, why don't you let me talk about transportable houses? You could build a transportable house, and in a 10-year time, it would be doubled in value. And, of course, they threw the book at me and said, Warwick, you go away and sort it out, which I did. And I suppose you could say for the next 2 or 3 years, we spent carting houses to Turangi. So,
and where did they come from, Warwick?
Basically, Rotorua. There were four. There was Lockwoods and Hunts and Richard Frost and Beasley's. And then across, that was in Tauranga and Rotorua. And then there was a chap in Tamaranui, Braithwaite was his name. And I suppose we rattled amongst those guys and said, well, this is what we need. And what I didn't realise that their prices were handed to the ministry, whatever they got for that. But I had the job to shift the houses. So in that period of time, I suppose you could say, I often think how many loads I would have done, but in hindsight, I would have probably taken 2,000 buildings and bits and pieces, because Mangakino was shelling out, and it wasn't the houses I shifted, it was all the work sheds and different blocks of buildings and other infantry, machinery and all sorts of stuff. So you can imagine how my marriage suffered about all that, because I was never home. And the simple thing was that we just had scheduled rates, and we didn't need any paperwork, and the money always came into my bank account every Monday and whatever.
Turangi was actually a town that was delivered. It wasn't actually built.
Turangi. When I went to in all those hydro sites, there were always lupins and bull and rushes and rubbish. And when we got there, of course, the motor scrapers were ripping around, and you got 4 seasons in one day. It was either raining or dust, or and here we were trying to work, and all we had was a peg in the ground with a number on it, and that's where that house went.
Yeah.
So we had a team of 2 groups of guys at Turangi that bunked in there, and by then the cookhouse was there, and I suppose you could say with 2 or 3 years, maybe more. Overall, the hydro years was about 12 years of hydro work. That was, and here was the ministry trying to put the screws on us about our road transport. And of course, I would hammer them and I'd say, well, 80-90% of our work is for the bloody government. Can't you get real? Let's sort it out. So, in a way, it was beneficial. We actually used that as a lever in towards road transport.
Yep, interesting. And an interesting part, just in the early years before I move on, was how your mother you had other ideas like aviation or working for Caesar Roos, going to Hawaii, and she kept nipping it in the bud and stopping you doing, didn't you?
I had a fantastic mother. She was like, I suppose you could say, mother superior. But anyhow, it must have been about the time I bought the Bedford truck. I biked out to James Aviation at Rookahare. We were in Hamilton East. So anyhow, I met Aussie. Aussie James was there. And anyhow, I said, I want a job as a loader driver. And I gave him the phone number and all that. And anyhow, the next day at home, the phone rang and Mum answered the phone. And the fellow said, oh, it's Mr. James here. I want to talk to Warwick. And Mum said, well, what's that about? And she said, well, I've got a job for him as a loader driver. And Mum says, Mr. James, I think you've got the wrong number. She hung up.
And of course, Caesar Roos wanted to take you to Hawaii.
Yeah. There was another one about the same time. What happened, that Caesar bought one of these LTS, like a tank landing craft that had a very shallow draft, and he'd bought this thing on tender in Honolulu, and he had to have non-union guys to handle the boat. So, of course, old Jack Watts, the manager of the yard in Hamilton, he said, boy, got a job for you. The chief wants you to go to whatever, Honolulu, and help him bring this boat back. So I went all jubilant. I went home and told Mum, I'm going to Honolulu. And Mum said, no, you're not. You get malaria and all other sort of things. And of course, today's day, I'd tell Mum where to go and I'd be gone anyhow.
Yeah.
In those days, your mother was boss.
Talk to me for a moment about the advancements in jacking houses, the arrival of the Trowella jack.
That's a history thing in its own, and most of the removal guys don't really realise the impact that we had. John Chambers in Hamilton was an engineering importing company, and during the war years they had a big plate glass window with all this tools and mechanism in the window with all discounted price, and because there was no imports, anyhow, sitting in there was these two Trowella jacks that were only about a metre high, about 4 foot high, and Dad and I were there looking at this. In fact, while we were there, we were looking at a building right alongside to reblock it. And of course, here we are caulking it there. And I said to Jack, we could alter those to cut that off and do that. So anyhow, he bought those two jacks and took them home. They were what they call stumping devils. And it had a funny, like a claw jaw on it. So cut that off and put a plate on it. And of course, the first thing that was wrong was that we needed another half a dozen or more. Two wasn't going to do anything. Prior to that, if you lifted a building, you used a bottle jack, which was a screw jack. And of course, you had wheelbarrow loads of packing, and of course, it would take a week to lift a building. But we could see the vision. So this Ben Waters, again, from the Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Works it was, went to him and we said to him, Ben, we need to get an import licence from these jacks that are in Trentham, Australia. The wheels set in motion, and half a dozen jacks turned up, and of course they were like gold. And straight away we were loading these transit huts we talk about, and of course 4 of those jacks, you'd lift the transit hut up within an hour, you'd load it, and they were absolutely outstanding. From there, of course, the restrictions and import licences were negative. You just couldn't get anywhere with the government. But fortunately, the ministry realised that the importance of the building removal industry was more or less getting into a better gear. What happened? I went across to Australia, to Trentham, Victoria. It's in Melbourne, Victoria. And I met these 2 American guys that were making these Trowella jacks. And I said, hey, you guys, this is what we need. We need to do this, and they got to be 5 or 6 foot tall, not this. Anyhow, straight away, they took on the task. The first 16 or 20 came by licence, and that took a while. And eventually we got an import licence for these Trowella jacks that we used to bring them in 50 at a time, and we'd pass them on to all the different house removal guys in New Zealand. I don't think they realised the fact that what we'd done, but we'd what you call stirred the tripe, And these jacks were, for 30 years we used those jacks. They were absolutely outstanding. In fact, to give you an example, Hawkins at Kinleith, they were building the paper mill machines, and this particular building needed to be lifted up about 4 or 5 feet, and it was for storing the paper. So they had 50 of these columns, and the idea was to jack the roof up another 4 feet, and the Hawkins guy said, was it opportune? So I said, yeah, we could do that. So we assembled the 50 jacks, a jack at each of those columns with a vertical, working at ground level, and the roof was already 10 metres high or 30 feet or more. So, of course, it needed 50 guys, so we organised all that through the riggers and the fitters and our gangs. And in a total day, those Truella jacks, we lifted the total roof up 4 feet, and they swung the pieces of steel in that were hanging by a chain, and it only took a day. It's all done.
All done.
So the jacking system, you can imagine us with those jacks for 30 years, and by that time they gravitated all through. Every house removal guy in New Zealand had them. And I'll give you an instance that a friend of mine in Invercargill became a friend. That was Fred Willison, working for King building removals. Anyhow, for some reason we talked about what we had with the Truellas, and Fred said, is there any chance of getting some of those jacks? And I said, yeah. I said, as a matter of fact, we've got a surplus lot here. If you like, I'll put 20 odd on a little truck that I've got, and I'll bring a set down. Will you do that? He said, I'll pay for them. The little international truck, I loaded the jacks on, and with the braces and the handle and the pegs. And I said to Fred, you line up 5 houses for the week that I'm there, and we'll shift the 5, one a day. Would you do that? They were doing one a week by using bottle jacks and trying to lift these damn silly houses. And of interest, it was for Richardson that's got the Hall of Fame down there. Anyhow, he was building pre-builts, and here I turned up with his little international with these Truella jacks on, and of course, Fred had a pug-nosed Nissan with a high-deck trailer, and we jacked the first one up, and we did the 5 houses in a week. And the Richardson guy came to me and he said, any chance of getting some of those jacks? He said, they're obviously good. I said, we've actually run out of credit. We've got no more licence, because I was trying to protect Fred. So that really put Fred on his feet.
And then, of course, Arthur Wilcox with the hydraulic.
Yeah. Well, Arthur's dad his father was Frank, and he was a hard case guy. He shouldn't have been a house mover. He was a clever bugger, and he was building those big log grapples that could unload 30 tonne off a logging truck, and he would make them out of whatever he could find. That was Arthur's dad, and that was Frank. But anyhow, he loved shifting houses because there was a joke. With every house he shifted, there was a joke. And Arthur, of course, must have inherited some of Frank's skills, because Arthur inadvertently decided to build a hydraulic jack, and what he found was 2 pieces of steel, the Japanese RHS in 4 inches and the American RHS 4 inches, one fitted over the top of the other. So all he had to do was to put a hydraulic ram inside all that, and a tap at the bottom, and bingo, he had a jack. And Arthur, as clever as he was, he made these jacks, and of course I found out what he was doing, and I said, how about bringing a set down to the yard? And which he did. So the jacks didn't leave the yard. I paid for them, and that was really the start of Arthur. Brilliantly, he made these. They were heavy and strong, and but that was the revolution. That was the finish of the 30 years of the Truella jacks.
Yeah.
It was something that we always talked about, but Arthur, with the brains that he had, and of course, you always had a spare time shifting a building. You might have had a day where there's no permits or you didn't have a job. So Arthur would turn his engineering ability, and he made these checks. So he deserved the full credit.
For us, the name Warwick Johnson is inextricably linked to the Tamahiri yard.
Yeah.
And when you used to go past there, you'd look out, see if there was a truck in there or
That's
something
right.
you'd see. But the whole Tamahiri yard, all the way through, you encompass this sense of fun and adventure and inclusion, including people. Like in the book, you say Tamahiri House and Yard, a 10-acre playground of houses, trucks, cars, tractors, horses, goats and sheep, and the ginkgo biloba tree, of course. But there's that, you try and make what is a really hard job a fun adventure for everyone involved, including the kids.
I was up against the fact that my wife wasn't prepared to help me. She said to me, you got yourself into it, you get yourself out of it. So that was it. But you could imagine the phone that would continually ring. You became synonymous. It was a bit like Weet-Bix or Sanitarium Health Food, or the name Johnson became synonymous with shifting a building. And even today, people realise that, yep, that was it. So that was a generation of time.
But it was also, you were also a troubleshooter for buildings in trouble. Like, people used to get you when if there was a building on a lean or tipped up or collapsed foundations, or it wasn't necessarily moving it. Sometimes it was saving it.
Yeah, I had a phone call from the police in Napier one time. They rang up and they said, what was I doing? I said, I'm standing here talking to you. He said, but let's get serious. He said, we've got an operator here with a house out on the road and the thing's starting to open up. It had been shifted before, but it hadn't been put together properly and it was all splitting and it was out on the road. And they said, could I possibly bring 2 truck and trailers? So next day we were in Napier with our 2 truck and trailers, and we collapsed and undid the house.
Yeah.
So there were things like that.
The Hauraki Plains house in the peak that had broken or collapsed floor, and you had to repile it down.
Yeah, well, every house has its own story. So the different jobs that you got involved with. I had a phone call one night, 10 o'clock at night, and this fellow rang me. He identified it was me, and I said, yeah. And he said, I want to shift my house. He said, it's falling into the sea. I said, well, when you're sober in the morning at 6 o'clock, you ring me. And I made out, I thought he was drunk, you see. So 6 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings, and he said, I'm bloody serious. He said, the porch has gone overnight, and he said, the house is going to go. He said, would you come? So this was down at Motu, down the coast towards New Plymouth. So we bundled everything in, and by about midday that day, we rescued the house off the cliff. About 100 feet straight down to the sea.
And then there was the Harsent house at Hahe, where the foundations in the sand.
Oh yeah, that was another one. That was a fellow there, Fred Harsent, and he was a very clever guy making saddles for the American. He made a saddle for horses, but anyhow, he probably had plenty of money at the Hot Water Beach, and they built this flash house up on the top of the sand, and the whole house had about a 12-inch lean. The whole thing was leaning, and of course the sand was getting blown away with the wind. So anyhow, yeah, it had a concrete floor. So anyhow, the back end was all right. So we put our jacks, our bottle jacks, we had 50, 20-ton jacks, and we put them in, lifted the building up. And of course, the next thing was to cut holes inside the house with the floor and shovel the sand in with the water. And of course, we just kept wheeling the sand in until it was all chocker. And we lifted the house above the datum so that it would settle down a bit, which it did. Yeah, that was just another one. So yeah, it goes on.
The move that put you on in the television in the living rooms of everyone in the country is
we call it St Mary's.
The St Mary's Cathedral move.
Prior to that, I suppose you could say I had a history of shifting churches. I used to shift an average of about seven churches a year throughout the North Island. I've become known as a church guy. So the phone rang this day, and it was the guy Dean Reimer. He was the so-called parson or minister of the Anglican Church at Parnell. I get up there and I open the trap door, and it's something that happens when the experience you have. In this case, I opened the trap door and all the cobwebs and everything came out with the doors. I pulled the door open. You know what that told me? I was the only guy that opened that trap door, so I knew that I had the key in my pocket. So I said to Dean Reimer, I said, we better have a cup of tea and talk about this. So went over to his parsonage, sat there. He was an Aussie. He's the minister of Anglican or whatever. And he was telling me how they're going to dismantle the church, and was I interested in, you're going to set up a tower crane in the middle of Parnell Road and they'd flick it all over and rebuild it. And I said, well, why don't you shift it in one piece? And he said, he was sort of gobsmacked a bit. He said, really? You could do that? And I said, yeah. I said, yeah, I reckon I could shift it. So anyhow, that's with Becca Carter. They had to have an engineer because I wasn't qualified as an engineer. They didn't know who the hell I was. So anyhow, I submitted a price. I think it was about £173,000, and that was back in 1980. I'm losing track of it. 1981, because 1982 was the day we shifted it. But in 1981, at the tail end of that year, it was a case of starting to look the possibility of assembling the gear. And of course, that just didn't happen straight away. And I went to the Huntley power site and I got some massive big steel beams, and I had all of them to weld up. So 4 of those made a beam that was 65 feet long. I did several of those. And I learned how to weld, did all that. So, so we jacked the building up, jacked it up in the air, and set to move it across the road. And,
how heavy was it? What?
Well, what happened, Becca Carter, and you relied on, here we go, professional guys, and they slipped up there. What they didn't realise that the studs of the building were 8x6, and that's 8 inches by 6 inches, and they were 26 feet long, and about every 2 to 3 feet there's what you call a stud. Anyhow, of course there was that, and then the weatherboards on the outside were pit sawn because the building was 96 or 98 years old, and the weatherboards were all pit sawn. So, and then of course it come to the stage of saying, well, what about the match lining? So the match lining inside was exactly the same. So here were the walls about 16 or 18 inches thick, and the window sills, I should have realised that the sill board, it was big enough for you to sit on. It was about 14 or 15 inches, and of course that was the width of the frame. So it added another 96 tonne to the weight of the building. So the building, they estimated it around about 230 odd tonne or something like that. It ended up at about 378 tonne. And of course the jacking system, unbeknown to me, we were at maximum, and was quite serious. In fact, I can say I cringe to do today for the risk that we took. The jacks, I had 10 of those American Unified jacks that were perfect for the job, but I needed another set of 10, which I organised through a phone call through Robin Renshaw of Chicago. So anyhow, the jacking system arrived and we jacked the building up, and when we put the pressure on, of course the building was that heavy, the valves on the jacking systems, they just squealed, they just whistled. So I rang Renshaw in America and I said, Robin, your jacking system is not working, we can't lift the building. And he said, I shouldn't tell you, but he said there's a little valve underneath such and such, if you were to twist that around a bit, he said you'll increase the pressure. So of course we increased the thing, and of course the whistling stopped and the thing went up. And so here we were sitting up in the air, 22 inches up in the air on 20 jacks, weighing 370 odd tonne, thank you very much. And of course we had to put the plates and the rollers in to start the roller. So there we were, yeah. Massive.
And and you say the pine rollers compared to the Remu rollers.
Yeah, well, going back into yesteryear, the veneer cores that we used to get were Remu, and of course they were as hard. They were the centre core of a tree. When I tried to get Remu centre core rollers, which were 9 inches in diameter, I couldn't get them. I ended up with pine, and the pine was soft. Okay, so the idea was put more in, but as the rollers were coming out the back, they were squashed. They were probably dented by about 1.5 inches. They were virtually the back end. The back wall of the building weighed nearly 90 tonne, and of course the steel was bending down, or it wasn't bending, but the weight was intense. And what was happening with the excavators digging out underneath, we'd stirred up the ground, made it like porridge, and of course the tail of the building was sinking back down, and I knew, I wasn't telling anybody else, but I said, well, let's get this damn thing going, because the more the ground underneath was turning to porridge, and of course the rollers were there, they were getting decimated, we were in trouble. We had the trucks and the winching power, and we winched the thing across the road.
And then you
took 6 hours.
Swung it around into position?
Yeah, they said it was impossible. What the hell do you think you're doing? And there were different people in the group of about 5,000 or 6,000 people that were all walking around. Think of health and safety today. No question of that.
Yeah,
there were wire ropes and excavators and cranes and all that. And of course, the photos don't do justice to the number of people, but there were thousands of people. There would be guys that were professional and 1 or 2 house movers, and they said, Warwick, it's impossible. How the hell are you going to turn it? And they said, you'll never do it. And I said, well, I'm going to have to do it, because in the early days, if they were Remu rollers, you could cut the rollers and you could walk the building around, which is what I intended to do. But of course, the pine rollers, you hit them with air, they just weren't going nowhere. So here I was, cleft stack, with a thing straight across the road with no knowledge of how I was going to turn it. So
and so you used hydraulic dollies to do that?
Yeah, so what happened from then, Trevor Jones from the the story thickens. Dale Heavy Haulage, Dale's, the fella carpenter was at the stage of selling up Dale's, and there was a yard full of stuff. The committee trailers were there, and there was a massive big turntable that was as big as the sitting room, and it was the keystone for twisting the building. So when you put two pieces of paper, one on top of the other, you'd naturally put that in the centre, and you think, well, that's where you'd turn it. It so happened, the two pieces of paper, the turntable, was way down the back end of the church, and that's where the pivot had to be when you twist two pieces of paper around. So yeah. I did that. And then the deal came with carpenter for the two trailers. So the freightways, they puffed themselves up and put their banners on and made out that they were shifting the building. And they said, Warwick, as long as we can fly the flag, we don't want you can have the trailer. So, a bit more graft. So there was a bit of sort of petty cash went underneath the whatever.
Yeah.
And the freightway Dale's guys, they were neat guys. There's photos of some of them there.
Yeah.
They gave us a hand for a few days while we twisted it around. And we put every wheel at the centre to that turntable was all at 90 degrees of that. Now, here's an interesting thing. The whiskers that we made at the yard were longer than the width of the building, so they stuck out either side, and there was a row of about 7 or 8 sticking out. And of course, we had guys with a laser level and the engineers telling us that we were going to buckle their building and all that. So that here were these steel beams. So what happened?
So the whiskers are the steel beams, the runners under the building.
Yeah, they were massive. They were 12 inches square. They were massive, and they would come from the Huntley power side, and I put 4 of those welded together. And of course, the welder guy that showed me how to do it, he said the welding will be stronger than the steel.
Yeah.
So I felt happy about that. So then, to keep the building in line, what I did is the beam at, we'll say that end and the beam at the other end, I put a string line and built a packing and put a string line over that. And then when you go to the beach and you make a sandcastle, so I made a sandcastle on each of those beams, and I stuck a little pin in it that string line was there. So the string line was over the top of that pin, and as we were winching, you could keep that. We had about 7 winches twisting it around, but the simplicity of it and how clever I was I kept the building with the string line with that pin there. You could say that was it.
That was it.
And the guys walking around, these engineers and Becker Carter and all the clever buggers, and here I was, and that was my magic, being able to keep the building in a straight line.
Yeah.
So, but you can probably say that experience is a great teacher, and there's no shortage of that in our type of industry, and most house removal guys are very clever, and don't underestimate them.
Well, look at lowering big tanks using blocks of ice.
Looking to
lowering big tanks using blocks of ice.
Yeah, that was the oil tanks. That was the Shell oil in Mount Maunganui, and for some reason I got a call to would I possibly lift the tank, and of course I'd never done one, but I got them to brace the inside and whatever. So we put our 60-odd jacks right round with a unified jack, and we lifted it up 4 feet, put it on pigsty so they could build a new base, whatever they did, and they tar sealed it all. And of course the day come to let it down, and the superintendent said, Warwick, you just not going to dig my bloody tar seal up? And I said, no, it's all right. I got it sorted out. And I knew that the second tank, they were mongering about that, and I said, well, how about we do a deal with the 2 tanks together, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do. So, yeah, okay, righto. So anyhow, I said I'm going to use blocks of ice, and I had a cool store guy down the road with 60 apple boxes with plastic bags, and he'd made a half-ton truckload of ice blocks. So later in the day, the little truck turned up with all these ice blocks about the size of an apple box. We put all them around the tank, took our jacks away because lowered it down, and these ice blocks were about, in the old language, 14 inches high, maybe like that, a bit higher. Anyhow, took our jacks away, and of course you'd say, well, the whole thing's going to crunch and crap to the ground. Well, it didn't go like that. So here we were sitting wondering what was going to happen. So I said to one of my guys, you go around that way and I'll go this way. So you just tapped it with a sledgehammer and it would shatter like crystal. So it took about 4 hours for the ice to melt. So here he is on the phone to England, to Shell Oil, and he said, believe it or not, these bloody stupid Kiwi guys, he said, they've let my tank down on blocks of ice.
And how heavy was the tank?
Yeah, it would be over 120 tonne, maybe more. No, we didn't know, didn't monitor the weight, but anyhow, we did the second tank the same, and then from then I did another 6 or 7 in Napier down Nelson with my son Grant. He went down there and did those with the dollies that Peterkin did.
Yeah, cool.
Interesting.
So the book's called Prime Mover, The Remarkable Life of Warwick Johnson. We've barely touched on the stories that are in it, and we're not going to tell you them all because you're going to have to go on to newzealandtrucking.co.nz, the shop, and buy yourself your own copy. It is a remarkable piece of New Zealand transport history written by a remarkable man. And how old are you today, Warwick?
I'm 88. In fact, I keep adding that up, but I reckon I'm 88, so I'm ticking on.
Yep, and it's sharp as a tack.
Well, I'm all right. My head's all right. That's on my shoulders, but from the shoulders down, I'm what you call bucket. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I never thought that would happen. Dad used to say, "You wait until you get to my age, boy."
This is the Keep On Moving podcast with New Zealand Trucking Media. Back to our feature interview shortly with Dave McCoid and the great Warwick Johnson. Just a reminder, stick around. Lots more trucks to come. We talk, in fact, classic trucks. We find out what's happening in Aussie and Great Britain, plus more as well.
Okay, the book is called Prime Mover, The Remarkable Life of Warwick Johnson. And look, to be fair, we've barely touched on the stories that are in the book. There's a fantastic story about Warwick's encounter with a real-life gangster and how he got the better of him. And Warwick himself, sitting here, says the book itself is probably 10% of his life stories that he could have put in. It could have been the size of a phone book. A remarkable snapshot of an amazing man's career in the building removal game, and he's right here with me now. And Warwick, I want to move now on to, we're a trucking magazine, first and foremost, and I want to move on to trucks and trailers. And in the book you actually say that your love of trailer design and building was so great that you almost ditched house moving for trailer design.
Yeah, I take you back in my life. The war years had just concluded, and Impact was to have a trailer for shifting these transit camps. And Dad was talking to an engineer that would build the chassis, and the trailer had to be designed. It was over length, and it wasn't allowed to have a deck on it because we weren't allowed to carry cement or timber, so it was just an open frame. The front axle was out of a Morris commercial bus from the Huntley, and the back end was an axle that Jack Tidd found with some 6-stud Ford hubs, and the brakes were only 2 inches, and was all hydraulic. The only time the brakes worked was the day of the vehicle inspector, when he turned up, so we'd screw the valves up with a screwdriver, and of course it skid the wheels, no trouble. So that was that. The day he did the warranty, he sat on the back with a gallon tin of yellow paint, and I said, "What's that for?" And he said, "I'm going to tip it on the tyre when you go up round the corner up there." And I said to Dad, "Make sure you go on the other side of the road when you go round the corner, because the trailer's going to cut across the grass." So when he got round the corner, the fella's hanging onto the trailer for grim death because Dad thought he had a horse and cart. So anyhow, the yellow paint was on the road. He said to Dad, it actually tracks brilliant. But he didn't know that the front part of the truck was on the other side of the road. So that was that. That was the start of it. And, of course, I was only about 16 or 17, and I think that at a younger age I was sharper. My dad was more interested in the horse and cart and the sledge or a konaki. And we go back beyond that to Pop. That was Dad's father-in-law or Mum's father, George Jack. And he made his wheels. He made them out of wood. And they were steel rim with wood put in the middle. Then he'd drill a hole in the middle and set fire to the centre to get it honed out to about a 5-inch cone, so a stub axle would fit on it. And the only lubrication they had was a 4-gallon tin of water that you had to walk alongside to tip it on the hub so it didn't catch on fire. The trailer that Dad built was done out of mostly second-hand stuff. The Chev truck, of course, was only a 4-6-ton Chev, so it was blessed with the job of handling the trailer, which it did. I suppose you could say we put up with that. I did, from my point of view. That was 1948, and during the 50s, the pressure where we needed a bigger platform trailer, we were always having to shift buildings with say 4 trucks, 2 going forward and 2 going back. So a 40-foot chassis was what we needed, which we got permission to build. And actually Hawkins built the steel frame and was 9'6" by 40 feet. And Tidds did the wheel assembly. So that was the start of it. Prior to that, we used the dollies that Tid had, and we put them alongside that trailer, and we took 20 houses up to Kopuka, to the coal mine. That was when they were building the Mirimiri power station. And these wobbly wheel dollies would sit alongside the trailer, and I had the Bedford, SP Bedford bus chassis with a 2-speed diff, and the truck was 300 cubic inch, about 120 horsepower. Of course, that was the tractor. The dollies were there, we bolt them alongside, but there was no brakes and no air, no nothing. The vacuum 2-inch thing to the trailer was insignificant. So eventually the day came when we used those dollies in a steel frame, made a trailer. So when I took over in 1957, 58, of course that trailer was the keystone to what we were doing. Take you further along the trail, the Transport in General, that was Ian Stevenson and Bill Bock. They were just two young fellas that started a workshop in Kent Street in Frankton. And I said to them, I said, Ian, I want to build a couple of trailers. And I said, the loads we seem to do are about 36, 38, 40 feet. So to keep within the law, we built a trailer. We actually built two trailers that were 34 feet long, only by 8 foot wide. So I'm talking an imperial measurement. And of course they were 825 20 tyres, second hand, of interest. They were Bedford hubs. You couldn't buy probably certified axles. The front axles, normally you'd target a 15-inch axle by buying an American low-loader trailer. You tip it upside down and you'd get the 15-inch wheels and hubs out of it. So Transport in General, they said to me, well, hey, Warwick, we can't get those. So what we did, we got some 3-ton Bedford hubs that were only 16-inch. So we had 825 16-inch hubs, and it was totally unethical to use them, but that was really the best we could. So they had no brakes, and the ministry never picked up on the fact that they were only a certain tier, and they really weren't strong enough, but they did the job. And what Ian and Bill did there was fantastic, and they were vacuum, so that was okay. So the 40-footer was vacuum. Of course, those hydro houses out of Mirimiri were all done on those sort of trailers, and we progressed through that into the generation of change. And in that time, my dad actually copied the 40-foot trailer, and he had a similar one built and with a TID walking back end, and had a J6 Bedford that he used to do it, and he endeavoured to try and shift a house from Hamilton to Toorangi, and it took him 17 hours, so that was the end of that. He only did one. That was the end of it. The advent of trailers, you're probably conscious of what's the change. By chance one day, this Chatham Island guy, old Manu Tuanui was his background. He came into my yard at Tamahiri. He said, I believe that you could be interested in a trailer. I knew of him as he had New Zealand arc welders in Rotorua, and his main job was building logging trailers with arc welding out on the sand and massive big beams, and he did a trailer for our local opposition, Dick Devandia, and I said, well, similar to that, but... So anyhow, I drew on the sand with a stick what I said to Manu, and so I disappeared to his yard, and he was peteking in a caravan. He obviously hadn't been there long, and Manu said, there's a young fella over there in the caravan, you go and talk to him. So I did. You might say that Neil and I became very close friends straight away, and you could probably say for me, I knew what I wanted, so with a stick in the sand, you draw in the sand what you wanted, and Neil being an engineer, he could pick up on the thoughts, and that's really how it all started. It had to be, I said to Neil, it wants to be hydraulic, and the ministry wouldn't listen, and they said it had to have springs. And the history of springs, it's suicide, because the springs would collapse on one side and expand on the other. So if you wanted to tip a house off, have a chassis with springs. In the early days, we used to wire the chassis down with a number 8 wire and a block of wood, and we'd screw the chassis down to the axle. And that's how we got away with it. We could hold the balance by being rigid. So anyhow, Peterkin got to work and he built the trailer. All done without a permit, without any authority. The ministry weren't involved. It became a trombone. And, of course, it was 825 tyres with the 3 axles all joined together at the back with a floating bogie. the time came some months later, I was at the testing station at Rotorua, and the vehicle inspector said, your idea of the hydraulic trailer, what do you think about it? And I said, well, we've actually built one. It goes good. Goes to Turangi every night. It's got a house on it. You want to come around and have a look? So I chucked him in the car, and away we get. He gets there, and of course here it is sitting in the yard with the house on it. So he didn't say too much. He walked all around it, and it had a Wankel motor up on the front on the gooseneck, and self-controlled. So I started up, and I lifted it up and did all this and did all that. And he said, well, how come, he said, you're not an engineer. I said, didn't have to be. I said, I had a fellow, Peterkin. I said, he's done the structural work. He said, well, how did you certify it? I said, well, all I did, I took the number plate off that trailer and put it on there. And I said, we've been going to Turangi for 6 months. And I said, you fellas weren't interested. So I said, we've proven a point. And I said, the hydraulic, you can throw the springs out the window. I said, your future trailers should be hydraulic, okay? So you could say that was the change in generation of, we'll call it trailer design. And Neil, I give him full credit for what he's done. And we did several trailers. And I've sat with him many a time at night time with a drawing board, and we'd spend all night until 7 a.m. in the morning, and the drawings would be really complete, and the fellas would turn up, and he'd be saying, well, we've got a job. And I'd say to Neil, you've got more than the job. I said, what you've just drawn is perfect. I said, what we'll do, I said, we'll build two, not one, we'll build two. So believe it or not, we'd build two, and the second trailer we'd bundle it on a ship and send it to Australia, because he had a guide in Surfers Paradise that was ex-Rotorua, and he was a friend of Neil's, so he was able to send the trailer to him, and he had it in his yard. And of course the minute the Aussies saw a hydraulic chassis, of course they panicked that we were going to go there and start up an opposition, so there was skin and hair flying there for a little while. So really, that's really what happened. And of course, trial and error. Rather than have money in the bank, you were better to build another trailer and improve on what you've already done. And the interesting story came as progress. We went from vacuum to air. So when a trailer was designed and built with full air, the trucks we had were still on vacuum. So the history unfolds. When we loaded the building with a truck was a full air trailer, and of course my truck was vacuum. So unbeknown to the ministry or other people that were involved, we used to have a piece of Malthoid and we'd put it in the Namco fitting. So I'd drive the load with no brakes, and I'd have brakes on the truck, but the trailer was floating. So I'd go from wherever to Turangi with a 30-odd tonne house on with no brakes. So I was able to do that.
Never had an issue?
Never, not an issue, no. Especially going downhill, that was exciting. So the evolution, the change, and of course it snowballed from there. And of course opposition people could see what we'd done, and they tried to copy. One or two, there was a chappie in Levin, made a trailer, an engineering fellow, and he made a very, very good job, very clever. The trombone trailer, he made it so good that when we had it after a week or two on the ground, on the road with the grit and the sand, you couldn't open the trombone because the grit had got between the two pieces of steel and it wouldn't open out. So there's another learning point, that to make a trombone you had to have a bit of a cavity there so that all your grit that you inhibited, I don't know where it ended up, but we didn't own it for very much longer.
And of course Neil went on to do wonderful things in his career.
Oh, Neil was a fantastic guy.
Just one of the icons of the industry, really.
He's got a brain on him like I can't answer the fact that he's so clever, but I think it's going back again to his younger years when he apparently grew up as an apprenticeship on a ship, and then he got a job with the Mets, and whether it was down at Levin or down that way somewhere, I don't know. But when he came to Manu in Rotorua, of course Manu had him in a trailer caravan with a drawing board. That was all there was to it. But poor old Manu, he was an incredible guy, and he's in terrible debt. And he actually said to me, he said, Warwick, he said, you can have this business, I don't want it.
And over the years, in the succeeding years, Warwick Johnson House Removals, you had both MTE and TRT gear?
Yes, I had a lot to do with TRT. I suppose it goes back to my dad, and Dad and Jack Tidd were good friends, and of course Tidd always did a wonderful job. there were opportunities that he did over the years for us, and naturally I went to him, and then there was another young fellow that broke away from Transport in General, Robin Radcliffe, and I gave Robin the chance to build a trailer, because by that time Neil had sold the Mets had taken over Neil in Rotorua and paid Neil $1 or $2, and regretfully Neil moved away from the trailer creation. That was a milestone that shouldn't have happened. But so Radcliffe got involved, and the experiences you have are such that certain things you know that are good and some things that are bad, and the gooseneck creation was, to me, important, and rather than just weld 2 bits of steel, you had to have a profile cut, and the profile was such that it was immensely strong. Swaps had a trailer some years before that, and the whole thing collapsed with the bulldozer on it, and the front part of the trailer dug into the ground and the bulldozer dislodged. So history repeats itself. So Robin he built what I call Mark 1 and Mark 2, and of course I wasn't interested until it got to the stage we had Mark 3, and by that time things were getting better, and he built the first trailer for me that was good, and it was a 3-axle, close axle, articulated, around about a 40-foot deck, perhaps a bit longer, tromboned out quite a bit. There were things that happened in that, of course, being air brakes and all that sort of thing. Then we got to the hydraulics dissolved and came to the discs. Instead of the hydraulic brakes, it became discs. So once we had everybody said that wouldn't work, it would get all the grip, but the discs, matter of fact, they're what every truck's got them today. An interesting thing that happened, and this is another thing that changes your life. To get an over-dimensional permit, in those days we had the fax machine, and the early days of the Ministry of Transport, to get a permit was just horrendous. You had to go there with a cap in hand and wait for the guy to sign the permit, and it created a problem to get a permit. And of course, as progress went on, they set up a central thing in Palmerston North for doing our permits, and I used to draw a drawing showing the illustration of the load and the weight and how the axle weights would be on the axle. And this particular day, I said to the girl down there, I said that I need an overweight on that particular drawing that I've sent you. And she said, Mr. Johnson, she said, I'm sorry, I can't do that. But she said, if you had that axle out at 2.4, she said, I would give you the extra tonne. I said, well, that's not going to happen overnight. I said, honey, give us the overweight for this one. And I said, I promise you here and now, we'll design a trailer with a 2.4 spacing. You could probably say that's how it all started. Little did that lady know how she changed the input on the hydraulic house trailer.
Right. Interesting, eh?
Yeah, just like that.
Just like that, yeah.
And because then I was able to draw to scale the trailer with a 2.4.
Yep. You knew what you had to build to get your permit.
In that case, I said to Robin, there's a way to do that, because in the early days, to get it onto soft sand and in the mud, we'd use corrugated iron, and it would fold up and curl up around all your brake fittings and light fittings, and it was just an absolute disaster. So in the designing of the trailer and getting out to 2.4, we're able to put what we call a skid pan underneath the trailer.
Yes.
So the skid pan, if you were successful, you left the trailer down low, but the skid pan would slide you through the mud.
Yeah.
So that became a fact.
Let's head to the front of the trailer. What's hooked to the front of it?
When Peterkin built the Tui trailer, of course, the turntable that we had on the truck, this is interesting actually, I bought a 4x2 Mercedes truck, and we were going to use it on that trailer, and the first day I put it under there, it was absolutely hopeless, so I gave that truck away to Taylor and Cully, and they gave me an International, an R190, was an R200 with an 8V53 Detroit, and of course the gooseneck was only made long enough to take for a short 4x2. So straight away we had to shift the turntable, and we put the turntable some 8 or 9 inches back behind the centre line. If you're a truckie and reading the instructions of how your turntable was, had to be so many whatever, and as a forward length. And here we were with the turntable about 8 inches behind the centre line. And the ministry never ever picked that up. But it was brilliant because it took the front axle off the ground, and we're in soft ground with a bit of power. All the weight was on the back end, so we had ultimate traction. So,
and was that a good machine, that truck?
So, yeah, the truck was a fantastic truck.
So what sort of gearbox in that truck?
It had a 5-speed with a 4-speed. And, of course, you could probably say I was a professional driver. I could drive it without using the clutch. I could do all sorts of things. So for 3 years, from 1971 through that time, I drove that truck, and we had a yard in Rotorua, Hamilton and Auckland, and I'd line up Rotorua with 5 houses in that week, and 5 in Hamilton, 5 in Auckland, back to Hamilton for 5. So I did that for 3 years, and that trailer became a legend on the highway because it was hydraulic. And there's a bit of a hard case story attached to that. I was coming out of Auckland one night, and I don't know how I came by. I had a whole heap of steel, angle-iron steel, that was about 40 feet long, and I think it was quite heavy. And the cop picked me up and took me to the Otahu way station, and it was coming on daybreak. It was a bit foggy. I drove up the ramp, and me being smart, the West Coast Mirrors, I was able to keep the driver's side out on the grass, and the other side was on the weighbridge. So when the cop turned on the lights and tapped the scale on the weighbridge, and he kept tapping it to think that, he said, I'm sure it's heavier than that. But what he didn't know is he only had half the trailer because the other half was on the grass. So after he tapped all that, I said, I think I better get going, I'm okay. So I drove off and left him to it.
Because there was always a bit of a...
He only got half the weight, the other half was on the grass.
Yeah, exactly. And there's all sort of, I don't know, like good humoured cat and mouse shenanigans with in those days, wasn't there, with,
Oh, it's true.
Yeah.
I think that I put it down to the fact that because you had to deal with the ministry so much and the permits and all that consternation of time, it was absolutely brutal to try and get permits. And the senior traffic police guys, they'd have their office girl in tears trying to give me a permit, and he'd be there gone away for a 2-hour lunch break, and he wouldn't have the permit signed. And taking a house to, say, Auckland, you used to go round to the North Shore, to Albany, you had to get a permit from Hamilton, and one from Papakura, one from Mount Roskill, where Keith Hay was, because he was difficult, and then we go round to, round onto Albany to, trying to think where it was. But anyhow, so you had 3 or 4 lots of permits that you had to get. And of course, when you had different cops that would come on through the night, of course you had this piece of paper with all these signatures on it, and it was just a nightmare.
What a nightmare.
Oh, absolute.
The International brand was a good brand for you?
Fantastic truck. It was an R200 ex-Air Force, and it had an 8V53 that was 237 horsepower, which was, in those days, we never had horsepower. Your trucks, the 6V53 Detroits that we had, they were only 195 horsepower. We ended up with Ross Todd with those when we changed from, we had a petrol to diesel. Ross Todd did 2, 3, 4, about 5 of those for me. And then we set up our own workshop in Rotorua, and we used to buy the trucks from Forest Products for £2,000, I suppose it was, maybe dollars, and we'd get rid of the back end for that sort of money. So we'd end up with a cab and a chassis, and then we'd buy 4 Detroits in one go from Clyde Engineering, and we'd set to build these trucks. And what happened, the Inland Revenue got a bit smart, and they started pushing me a little bit. So they came to our yard in Rotorua, and they asked all sorts of questions that you could well understand. And what was this and what was that? And of course I had an answer for all of them. And as the token that most truckies have got is what you call R&M. So that was repairs and maintenance. So I bluffed the guy with all the R&M and all the old motors that were laying there, but he didn't realise that we were actually building a new truck out of whatever. And of course I bought the million miler diffs off Tids, and we built a magic truck. The
name Warwick Johnson House Removals is sort of in many ways, again touching on for people sort of in my era. There's 2 big R700 Macs that suddenly say, how did the Macs come about?
It goes back to 1973. I'd waltz on a bit, but we went to Australia to a truck show in there, and we went to a place called Toowoomba, and there was a guy at Toowoomba that had a fleet of 400 odd trucks, and in that workshop he was building the Leader, which is a truck that was homemade, you might say, with a cat motor, and was a very, very strong truck. In the days 1973, nobody had any horsepower. The little R600 Mac was 237 horsepower. That was maximum, and these Caterpillar motors that they were doing was probably about the same. But this Cyril guy introduced us to this and that, and there was something like 30 or 40 of us there. It was like a banquet meal with all the silver, and the meal was fantastic, and the guy was sure that we were going to buy some of these Leader trucks. But tucked in the corner was an R600 Mac from America, and it was sitting down in the dust, and one of us said, what's that truck doing down there? I suppose you could say to me, in my early days as a young fella carting the houses to Puriora, the Mack trucks they had in there were about 10 foot wide, and they didn't have a cab, but they were ex-military, and those two Mack trucks they had carting the logs gave me the history that if it was a Mack truck, it was going to be good. So anyhow, Ron Carpenter was there, and this is history. Ron told me in later years that there was, out of say 40 or 50 of us, half of us that day signed up for an R600 Mac. So that put Motor Truck on the business of, and they imported this truck. I think it was $47,000 by then, 1973. So that was all right. So come time, and Ron Carpenter got cracking, and he started assembling trucks directly from the States. And of course the horsepower had gone up into 300, 375, and I went down there. I thought, well, I'm going to have a look at these Macs. So I had some money in my pocket, and I thought, well, I'll at least get one. But when I got there, the guy that was doing the assembly work, I said, oh, you can walk through the workshop. No health and safety in those days. Anyhow, he said, there's those two Macs away over there parked up. He said, they've been there for a fair time. He said, nobody wants them. He said, they've got 44s. Well, I knew what he was talking about. The 44s are the size of the diff. And most truckies only wanted 39 because there was the extra weight, and weight was a problem. But for house removal, we never overweighted. The house is not heavy. But anyhow, I said, well, I'd be interested in one of those. So anyhow, the conversation went on. They ended up with the price at £93,000. So in the delay and the discussion, the other truck was shivering and sitting there on its own, and I said, well, how about the other one? Can I have that too? So we negotiated a deal that was better than $93,000. So I ended up with two Mack trucks, and they were 375, absolutely brilliant. And we thought we were the king of the road, which we probably were at the time.
So they were like 375 V8s?
Yeah, V8s.
Yeah, and what did they have, the old 12-speed maxi torque in them?
They weren't favourable to the average truckie. They had a heating problem to do with the V8 part of the fact of it, but the fact that from a house removal point of view, we might only be 3 or 4 hours and we'd park up, and the motor, we weren't expecting to do 24 hours around the clock.
Yeah. But those two trucks were good for you?
Oh, we had them. The biggest mistake I made when I had them for 21 years. When I had them for 10 years, I should have got rid of them and got two new ones. But they were so reliable and regular, they were fantastic, and you could hook a bulldozer on and pull the hell out of them, or front bumpers were strong enough to do what you wanted. You couldn't kill them. They were absolutely outstanding, and in that time I had several Macs, and I think I've added up, I've had about 10 of them in my time.
Oh, and they're all being good trucks to you?
Oh, fantastic. They were outstanding.
Another couple of trucks that I want to talk to you about, and I've had a couple of people who knew I was coming to talk to you, asked me to ask about the Nissan Diesel TW52As. Yeah. How were they to you? Were they good trucks?
That happened, it was around about 1984. And again, a group of us went to Japan, and the idea was that I was interested in a Nissan truck. The Nissan people actually shouted us a deal. So we go there, and yes, here's the Nissan there. I want one of those. I want two of them. So I bought two of them, and they were 6x4. I actually wanted a 6x6, and they had the 6x6 on the chain line building them, but they were all going to Africa, and they wouldn't talk to me about a six-wheel drive. So I got the Nissans as they were. I could say to you now, those Nissans were absolutely brilliant. You put the two trucks side by side, because we had a lot of trucks with winches on. We probably had about 10 internationals and other trucks with winches, and we set these two Nissans up with winches and whatever. And if you were stuck in the mud with a 190 with the mud, the Nissans would actually walk past them in the mud. Whatever magic was in the back end of those Nissans, I'll never know. But they were just an outstanding truck.
And they were, what, 350 horse or
330 horsepower?
330 horsepower.
And they had a Road Ranger gearbox. If you never used a Road Ranger and used to the twin stick, you had a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
You had to learn to whatever.
Yeah.
But they were all right. I tried to give them to my guys that worked for me on a labour-only basis, but they didn't realise the gem that I was trying to do for them. And I ended up with one of them out of the scrap heap, and I rebuilt it and spent a fortune on it. And the history of that truck has gone to Fiji, and I put a new cab on it, and I virtually gave it away.
Really interested in the holistic vehicle, the truck, the trailer, and the engineering of both.
As my wife said, you're married to your bloody truck. She wasn't very happy about me, and it caused a few problems, I might say. I never realised the importance of it, but people used to always say, Warwick, listen, hey, you've got to write a book. I took on board the opportunity to write a book, and that's how it happened. And I never ever believed that it was going to be history. And I can boast to you now, that's 70 years. 1948 to 1988, if you add that up, that's quite a few years. My brain is so ticking away like talking to you now, and I wished I had another 30 years, I'd sort of do something more about it. But the trucking industry is on a paramount of fantastic opportunities, and where I live here now at T-Rail, they come through the town with 50 tonne on, they don't even change gear, up and over and through the hill and underneath the subway, and they're gone.
Warwick, you're very proud of your involvement in the New Zealand Heavy Haulage Association. Tell us how that all got started.
That was an interesting story, because being Pelican and being me, and I suppose you could say that the house removal industry badly needed an organisation. We badly needed a representation within the unit. So anyhow, Waikato Heavy Haulage, this goes back to George Scotty. And I said to him, how about I come with you to your Wairaki, to your AGM for your heavy haulage? And so me being me, I ended up with Scotty, and I'm sitting there with all these guys all smartly dressed with their ties, and they had a pretty unique sort of an outfit that was like the gentleman's club. And here I was, just in an old pair of clothes with no tie on, sitting there listening to what they're going on about. And I actually said that, because I'd been to America and I'd witnessed the heavy haulage in America, it's all done by building removal people, because they're clever, must I say. So anyhow, I was able to tell these guys that anything over 3 or 4 metres wide, they couldn't handle it, they were scared of it. And I said, well, why don't we sort of bring our house removal guys, and we could create a better association, we could do something about it. Richard Hyde, he was quite a snappy little fella, and he sort of chiselled me a bit, and Trevor Jones was down the other end of the room, and they were arguing about things, and in the end I sort of won the day, and they said, well, in that case we're going to have a logo. And I said, so there again, these two guys were arguing whether it was a Kenworth or a Mack or a Peterbilt, and I said, well, you don't need that, all you need is a trailer, a house removal trailer. And one of them said, well, you're a smart bugger. I said, I know that. So anyhow, they put it to me. They said, the next meeting you can come, but bring your ideas. So, of course, I did that. And what they didn't know, that working for me was Robin, his wife was a graphic artist for the Waikato Times. Anyhow, I said to Robin, how about we talk to your wife about, this is what I want to do, we've got to want to put this is how we want to do it. So I drew it out. So she came up and we sort of sat down side by side, and the deal came with this hydraulic trailer. And what you've got to do now, you've done such a good job, let's put a bit of red on it like lipstick, because it's all female oriented, so the drawing's got red on which is the lipstick. I tabled it at the next meeting, and of course it was unanimous, it was accepted. I suppose I stirred the tripe in that day, and they say that within probably the next 12 months we had a membership equal to way beyond these 5 or 7 guys that were smartly dressed, a whole heap of hobo house removal guys all sitting around a room we were setting up a deal between us. And I told them, I said, you guys will melt away into the system, which did happen. And consequently, we've got a fantastic membership with the New Zealand Heavy Haulage, and I'm pretty proud of that.
Proceeds of the book are going to St John's?
That's right. I've been talking to my Heavenly Father, and he doesn't want me to take a heap of money with me. So I've got $1 or $2 to one side, and my idea to support St John's. And I think on the highway today, the St John's people struggle to survive. The fire department have got fire and rescue written on their vehicles. What St John's gets 72% from the crazy government, and they've got to inherit the other by donations for people. So within my book, I've dedicated an ambulance, and that's going to be part of me. I'm very happy about that.
So that's another fantastic reason to grab yourself a copy of the book, that the proceeds of what the book makes will go to really saving lives through the St John's.
Yeah, the people of St John's, a lot of those people are volunteers, and day to day they've got ambulances parked up when they haven't got the staff.
Yeah.
And the volunteers are not being paid. The stupid government of today don't recognise they're spending it on silly damn things, building, like they try to build that cycle track underneath the Harbour Bridge. But if they could support St John's, and even if they gave them another 10%.
So you're also a great believer in nowadays. You don't think that young people can get close enough to the action?
I feel sorry for them. The industry's got to take, I don't care who you are, we've got to take on board the young people. And look at me, at my age, when I was 16, I was driving a Chev truck with a load of sand on it, that the traffic cop of the day, which was the local council, for 2 years he said, I've been watching you, but I never had an accident. I've never ever had an accident. The young people of today have got to have a chance. They've got to walk in and lean. They're not allowed to even travel in the truck and learn how to handle horsepower, how to take your foot off the brake, and how to drive without using your brakes. And and even in the building industry it's the same. And the younger people today, we've got to give them a chance. And if we don't, already we're short of truck drivers. They've got, you go to some of the local carriers and you say, well, what's all those 10 or 12 trucks? Oh, we haven't got any drivers.
After reading the book and going through it, and what I took out of the book is, you say in the book that, there was a little bit of ego on your part for the things that you took on, and did it so humbly. Like, you were always involved people, and you always made it a venture.
Yeah, I think that. I think I've ended up with enough money to have my own house, but other than that, forget it. I think it goes right back to my grandfather, and I watched him, and he suffered terribly, and he got diabetes and lost his eyesight. In fact, he lost his eyesight. He was still shifting houses. And I felt for him, and I think I used that inference with Pop, that whatever we did in our life with men and people that worked for you, they had to be equal. We all had to be shared the same impact of. We go back to those years when I probably first started on my own. I couldn't have done it on my own, and I had 3 or 4 guys. We're all the same age. We all thought the same. We all shared each other's time. They all got paid. I never had any money. I was always an overdraft. I was dedicated in the industry of trying to improve the welfare. When you look at it now and see the activity of the house movers throughout New Zealand, I suppose you could say I sowed the seed way back, and I never realised that what we were doing was entering into the book of history. Like the time I went down to Fred Willis and gave him a set of jacks, and I said, we're going to shift the house, 5 houses, one each day, and how the opposition came along, and I sort of stalled them because I wanted to help Fred and make sure that it was a success. And by being a success, it radiated from him, and it bellowed its way back up through the South Island, and it goes on. Yeah, I'm very proud of what we've done.
What happened to Warwick Johnson House Removals in the end? Did you sell out, or?
I still own the company. I tried to dissolve it. My accountant said, no, I've given Diane the reins, and she takes away any bills and debts, because I don't understand the www.co, and all my checkbooks are still in the drawer. You can have all them.
Yeah.
Well, I've given the company to Diane. She'd become a shareholder or a director, and my passing, which will be in a day or two. Here's an interesting thing. I've even down in the yard in my office here, I've even got my own coffin leaning up against the wall. I've saved probably about $10,000 on having a coffin built, so and the company paid for that.
Warwick Johnson, it's been an absolute pleasure to sit here this afternoon for a couple of hours and promote the book and share the stories. The book, as we've said, is called Prime Mover, The Remarkable Life of Warwick Johnson. It's an absolute must-read if you're a New Zealand trucking buff. And I think I'll give you the rest of the afternoon off, mate. You can go and do whatever you like now. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, it's a pleasure talking to you. And my brain is still going round in circles, but I sort of live with the industry. I can't. That's part of me. It'll never change.
This is the Keep On Moving podcast. We're talking trucking and all sorts of things. We've got a brand new feature, and it's going to be a monthly. We're talking with our trucking family around the world. We're starting with a gentleman called Mike Williams in Aussie, and we're going to herald Mike with a little waltzing Matilda. Woohoo!
What's hot in Aussie trucking, Mike? What's happening over the ditch?
We've had a bit of a serious thing happen over here. Young Miss Michelle Pillar was driving a stock crate down near Colac in Western Victoria, and she made a bit of a mistake and it ended up laying on its lid. Unfortunately, she sustained some fairly serious injuries, lost both of her legs in that accident. One of the local roadhouses where she's well known have started a fundraiser for her, and I suppose the upside is that the community's wrapped around her. The community sort of wrapping themselves around her and trying to give her a bit of support. And the company she works for, Boyles, is probably one of the most recognisable stock carting businesses in Australia. They're helping her out. And she's only a young girl, 25, and it's sad to see. On the other side of it, it's started a conversation now about how this sort of thing happens all too often in Australia, not just to her, but to hundreds of other people. And perhaps it's time for us to start talking over here anyway about maybe a fund to help people out in the immediate aftermath of an accident.
And I understand there's a huge groundswell of support, like with fundraising that's swung in behind her. People
have been donating all sorts of things to be auctioned off, and it's well over. It's into the thousands. It's over 10,000 last time I looked at the GoFundMe.
Yeah.
Just an incredible amount of things that people from inside the industry have donated to be auctioned off. It's not something I've ever seen before.
Yeah.
Not at this level.
And it's a really interesting point, because quite often you hear, sentiments went to sort of truck drivers from a past era saying how they have a sense that the camaraderie's been lost off the road. And I always argue that I understand what they're saying, but like so many things in road transport, it's been foisted upon us. Like, we never had booking times that we had to meet, and so if you turn up at the booking time and say, I did a social service on the side of the road, I helped me mate change a battery or fix his lights or do something, it's met with more often than not just with like a brick wall. So quite often truck drivers today would love to stop, but they just know the whole rest of the week's going to be thrown into turmoil, whereas once upon a time it was about community first and stuff later.
Yeah, mate, the mateship has certainly suffered in this game. In fact, I've actually written about that. Been published in Big Rigs, the article I wrote asking if the mateship has gone. I had a chat with Barry, who's a mate of mine, and Barry Grimson. He was one of the guys that started the Razorback blockade in 1979 here in Australia, and him and I had this same conversation. He feels like you. Times have changed. It's not the drivers have changed, it's the circumstances around the drivers, the way we're pushed into having to just keep going and keep going. Of course, we've got all the compliance stuff over here as well, with the cameras up and down, taking pictures of you and timing you everywhere you go. And guys running electronic logbooks now. There's a whole raft of things that have changed. And look, some of it's good, but some of it's it's basically changed the fabric that we got used to as drivers.
Yeah, we wish you all the best for recovery, and like you say, it's a fascinating industry because I've always said, an airplane has a cockpit full of people. A train is hugely restricted on where it goes. A boat's got a party of thousands on the deck, but 23 over here, 23 meters in 3.5 meters of lane, doing 90 kilometers an hour at 50 ton, and the complete control of one person. It's a big risk game.
Yeah,
and you've got that thing out in the complete public arena at the behest of whoever you're passing.
That's right. Yeah, no, it's incredible when you actually sit back and you think about the mechanics of what we do.
Yeah.
There's a hell of a lot there going on.
Yeah, there is. There is. You've just talked to us about dropping the borders into Queensland. And so what was that all about? Was that just the pressure for supply chain got too great and they had to stop?
You really want to start me on this stuff?
Have I pressed a button?
There's a red rag sort of. Mate, I've actually banned COVID conversation on my
show. So we won't talk about Western Australia?
No, look, that's not it. Look, the short story of it is, I think that common sense has finally broken out.
Yeah.
We can, it's all got too hard.
Yeah.
There's the whole PCR test thing, the border pass thing, the whole having people stopped on the side of the road, and the queues for the traffic, and everybody's just up in arms, or they have been, about getting back to normal. We've had this stuff going on for 2 years now, like everyone else. The level of insanity is probably the wrong word. The level of just compliance that people have had to go through on a day-by-day basis. We've had the rules changed twice in one day over here sometimes. Just ridiculous. So what's happened now, there are no longer any border closures. There are no longer any requirements for passes. There are no longer any requirements to prove that you've had a negative PCR or any of those sort of things. And as a consequence, even though we do have this vax mandate that's in place, there's nowhere to prove that now. So there's nowhere to check it. There's no pass to put it on. We've sort of come to the don't ask, don't tell stage now, I think. And that's the way it goes. Of course, Western Australia is an entirely different animal altogether.
Yeah.
And I think that they think that they're a different country from time to time. Believe me, there's a certain level of happiness in Western Australia. I know I've just spent the best part of a year over there. I think that they could quite happily go their own way. If Mr. McGowan said, let's make Western Australia a separate country, I think there'd be a few people put their hand up. But anyway, that's another story, another time, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. And we love Western Australia here, because just when we think that we couldn't be any more incarcerated here, we think, we are a bit freer because...
Oh, mate, I tell you what, there's just so much going on. It's a great pleasure for me to come and have a chat with you. And if you've got listeners that have got any questions about anything they want me to find out about, I'm happy to dig into all that stuff.
Oh, look, absolutely. And if everybody heard that, Mike's happy. You said, flick me your questions, and at the contacts for the podcast, which you'll see on the website. And we'll put some questions to you about it. It can be anything, lifestyle,
absolutely
anything, absolutely anything. So, Mike,
except for the colour of my underpants, mate.
Yeah, and well, if that's the taste of things to come for the next however long, 12 months, 2 years, half a century, then I think we're going to get on just fabulously. And so don't forget, everybody, Friday afternoons the podcast drops. It's Mike Williams on the Road podcast in Australia, and so that's two great listening opportunities. Once a month with Keep On Moving at this stage, and once a week with Mike on the road. Thanks so much, Mike, for coming on. Looking forward to talking to you next month.
Thanks, mate, Dave. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Now, you're listening to the Keep On Moving podcast out of New Zealand, and our next correspondent is actually Will Shiers in England. And Dave, he writes for what magazine is?
Will's editor at Commercial Motor magazine. Now, just to give a bit of a background on that, readers and listeners will know that New Zealand Trucking Media, or New Zealand Trucking Magazine, is the associate member of the International Truck of the Year organisation, our associate member for New Zealand. And Will is Will's magazine, Commercial Motor. Will's actually a voting judge for the International Truck of the Year jury. So Will's big time. And so we have that association, and I've had quite a few drinks with Will on different trips, and he's a fantastic bloke, and his dedication can't be questioned, because when he did this interview, he was actually sitting in the back of the car while it was snowing with COVID.
I do. I've had it for 9 days now. My whole family had it for the second time in 6 weeks. But I'm the only one who's still testing positive. They're all back to school now, the kids.
And you say it's like a heavy cold.
Yeah, exactly that. At its worst, it was like a mild flu. I mean, I've been vaccinated and boosted as well. So yeah, a mild flu, heavy cold.
Oh, well, all the best from us here, mate. And speedy recovery. And moving on to the subjects of trucks in Europe and the UK in winter, what have you got to tell us? What's happening in the motherland?
All anyone's talking about at the moment is alternative fuels. You know, it's madness, isn't it? Despite the fact that 99.9% of everything that's sold is still diesel, the truck manufacturers only want to talk about their electric offerings. You know, they're definitely going different. They've got different positions on the way forward here, haven't they?
Yep. So how much is fuel over there?
It's around about the same as you, I think. We're paying £1.50 a litre.
And so where's the pace being set in the alternative fuels thing? Like you say the talk's all there, but what's actually going on? Who's got wheels on the ground?
So you can buy an electric Volvo, DAF. I think that's about it at the moment. Volvo are especially proactive. You can order just about anything, including Arctics and tippers as well. But the only one that's actually been delivered at the moment are their rigids, the FL and the FE. Oh, and I'm forgetting, of course, Renault as well. They're pretty advanced. Again, rigids.
So are these pure EVs or FCEVs?
No, they're pure EVs. You know, over the years, I've driven so many different trucks here, but I recently had the chance to drive the Volvo, and the public reaction was incredible. Normally, the public don't notice a truck, you know, unless it's to complain. But you pull over in one of them, and there's so many questions. What is it? You know, what does it cost? What's the range? They're really, really interested.
Right, and I suppose they know because it's emblazoned with huge. I'm an electric truck.
Yeah. And of course, that's what's going to happen, isn't it? With the first ones that go on the road, you'll get these big multinational fleets running thousands of trucks, but they'll get one electric truck, sticker it up with how green they are, tell the whole world. Meanwhile, the diesel trucks will do the hard work. What was interesting, when I took it around central London, which of course it's free of the congestion charge and the LEZ and everything. What the public don't realise is a current modern Euro 6 diesel engine is actually cleaner than the air they're breathing in London anyway. So modern diesel trucks are cleaning up the air in the capital.
Yes, yep. That's right. And we've got one crusader of we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater in New Zealand, and he's very strong on this, that we actually haven't milked the cow on the diesel, and we've actually got a far better product than what we think we've got. We shouldn't just chuck it out.
That's right. I mean, Scania have just launched their new super driveline, haven't they? And that's more than 50% thermal efficiency.
Yeah,
and that's the part they thought they'd never reach.
So, I mean, we've had a lot of New Zealanders over here locked down for quite some time, and they've been saving their shekels or something, and we are a nation of travellers. We had to travel to get here. So when we are ready to go and when we're ready to get on our planes and blast off to all corners of the world again, well, you've got a destination for truck enthusiasts that might be of interest, I hear.
Absolutely. Stoneleigh Park in Warwickshire, right in the heart of the UK. So what we're doing, we're launching a massive great truck show over here called the Road Transport Expo. It's going to be held at the end of June and the first couple of days of July, and it promises to be massive. We've got just about all the truck manufacturers signed up for that one. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That should be great.
So is it going to be like trade show and display, or are they going to be working exhibits and things is it going to be interactive things to do, or just look on, or how? What's the format, mate?
There's a bit of everything there. So we're going to have a main central hub, and then several zones all around it. So we'll have a tipper zone, a trailer zone, a tanker zone, a crane zone, and also a ride and drive. So people who sign up to come, when they register for free, incidentally, they can choose what trucks they want to have a go in.
Fantastic. Well, so there's the place to go when your winter's coming on and you're starting to feel a bit cold. Head over to sunny England in June and go to Warwickshire and look at a ginormous truck show. I'll let you go. Will, you're in the back of a car in the freezing cold to keep out of the family, and so you're in a quiet place. So all the best, mate. Keep well. Drink lots of tonics, and talk to you next month.
Brilliant. Cheers, Dave.
Will Shiers, who we look forward to catching up with on a monthly basis, hopefully in better health and maybe not sitting in the back of a car trying to hide from people. Right now, it's time to call on the boys. Kirk Kirkbeck,
Clock. Yeah.
Hey, I'm supposed to abuse you. You don't have to abuse yourself.
Oh, I don't have to. Oh, that's self-mutilation.
Punishment. He just likes it that way.
And the editor of New Zealand Trucking Magazine, Gavin Myers. Hi, Gav.
Hey, Muzz.
Again. Okay, let's have a look at what's in the magazine for February.
Yeah, it's another top issue, if I say so myself, I reckon. Dave, maybe you kick us off with a little wrap of the lead.
Yeah, absolutely, Gav. And I was in my element once again back in rural transport. Love rural transport. Well, love all transport, actually, as you well know. But, rural transport. And I just love the IP in those places. And I tried to sort of convey that in the story, the information that the guys hold, the how engaged they are with their customers, how well they know their customers, and just an absolute joy to spend a couple of days with Aaron Tate, the driver of the CF 530 Euro 6 staff, and then sit down and have a yarn in the dispatch office with Kent Rowland at Rural Transport's Coorau Depot. And you can't get any more rural than Rural Transport's Coorau Depot. So yeah, that's the cover job in the February issue. And mate, what a fantastic place! What fantastic people.
Mm-hmm.
Understand, Carl. You feature in the magazine. What was it, page?
98. Well, no, I don't feature myself, but we wrote a fantastic story. Doug Elliott, a model truck extraordinaire from down Tauranga way. Got history that goes right back, riding around with the likes of all the boys at Alf Wallings and over the Napier Taupo and so forth into Pampac. So some great history there, but his models are absolutely incredible. They're just... the scratch building, the level that he goes to is just mind-boggling.
Like when we see those models like Marty Crooks's Kenworth a couple of months ago and now the Alf Walling Max, and we remember those trucks, eh? They're like
absolutely.
Miniatures. Yeah.
It's just the level of detail that the boys are going to now. There's a real challenge, I think. It's not really sort of one-upmanship or anything like that, but it's just little things like in the ignition of the FR, there's actually a set of keys. 1/25th scale. There's a set of keys in the ignition.
Yeah, no, those aren't the only Macs in the mag this month with impeccable detail. There's also great story on a couple of impeccably restored FRs from the west coast of the South Island.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, Murray Brunning and Les Hayden. And this story, apart from the fact that they are the two of the most immaculate restorations I think you could ever feast your eyes upon, it just dispels the old myth of I don't have time, because these guys, one of them's a full-time truck driver and one of them was a full-time brewer through the bulk of the restorations, and now he works in the rural support business in the West Coast. And they've restored these two bloody Macs to the point from absolutely nothing to better than they were when they would have left Palmerston North. No disrespect whatsoever to the old team at Palmerston North, but just the time and the attention to detail and the polishing of bolt heads and just they are absolutely stunning. Yeah, and from Max and Greymouth, we go to the top truck of the month. You can make your vacuum cleaner pristine and powerful. The top truck is a Hino 700 series, a ginormous vacuum cleaner that that looks absolutely stunning. If you want to make your vacuum cleaner look just a superb showpiece, then Clark Underground from Palmerston North have done that. They are proud of their kit and proud of their truck, and it's so rightly deserves the poster spot. And it's something a little out of the ordinary for the poster section. Speaking of cleaning up, the clean and nice and clean, the Alexanders have replaced their Alexander Group have replaced their K200 Kenworth that towed the AdBlue diesel emission fluid tanker with a brand new what is it, Gav? What's arrived in the Waikato? It's a celebratory truck celebrating 50 years in business, and it is
it's a very special, very powerful new Scania. It's the world's first 770S 2.3 meter sleeper cab tractor. It's joined their fleet.
Yeah, and it's an absolute jaw dropper, isn't it?
Oh, stunning! Absolutely stunning.
That would have had the team back in Sweden, but he sort of drooling, looking at a 6x4 with a 2.3 going down the production line, wouldn't it?
And two diffs.
And yeah, that's it. Two diffs rather than six before. Yeah.
Yeah. With a big sign on it. This is how you make a real truck.
This is where traction starts.
Yeah. So clean cargo and clean lines, and the clean doesn't end there, Gav.
Yeah. We also take a look at what might be the future of trucking in New Zealand. We don't know, maybe with the first hydrogen-powered Hyundai Accent to land on local shores. New Zealand being in the very fortunate position of being only the third market in the world to get one of these trucks after Hyundai's home ground of Korea and of course Sweden.
New Zealand Trucking Magazine, the original voice of the New Zealand trucker.
Okay, let's talk classic trucks now. Here's our man on the ground, Dave Ching.
Here we are today talking to Clive Gordon, who has got a few classic trucks here in Canterbury, and we're just going to discuss what he's bought, his latest project, and some other ones that he's got underway. So what's the one you bought recently, Clive?
Just bought an OLB Bedford. Bought it off a friend who started the project and then got sidetracked into British sports cars. Anyway, I've made him an offer he couldn't refuse. My father used to have one as a truck for a general carrying business in Christchurch, and that's the attraction, really.
So has it been panelled, painted, engine, transmission overhaul? What sort of space is it on?
Gary's actually done quite a lot of work to it. It's been painted. It's a really good runner. It's not road registered at the moment. Needs a deck built and a couple of very minor things. So it's a wee bit further on than a couple of the other projects that are in the shed.
You said your father had one years ago, so I'll take it once you've got it all back together again, it's ready for signage, everything. You're going to put your father's name back on the door?
Absolutely. It'll probably finish up living in the Timaru Museum, because they're not. Let's be honest, an OLB is something not that you're going to take on a lot of rallies, and truck runs and things, but it will go out a bit. The likes of perhaps Wheels at Wanaka, if we're lucky enough for it to go ahead next year.
Yep.
It may well get a ride down on the transporter and then get to drive around down there and that sort of thing.
Nice. What about the KM? You've got a KM. Where'd you find that?
New Plymouth. Richard Webb from the North Island Classic Commercials put me onto that. He said there was one rusting out the back of the Technology Museum out there, and I went up. I managed to track down the owners. It had, I don't know what went on, but anyway, they needed to remove their stuff from the back of the museum. So went up, flew up, looked at it, decided that it wasn't beyond redemption, and you just can't find them these days anyway.
Yep.
Neither of the people that own the ones that we used to run many years ago were willing to sell them back. I purchased that one, and while I was there, had a D-Series Ford, which is also V6 Detroit powered, that now a friend of mine has bought, and it's we've had it running, and he's got another cab. It needs another cab. Got another cab for it, but that's quite about as far as that one's got at the moment. But that's not my project.
So KM 6B71?
Yes, KM 6B71, 9-speed Road Ranger, what they call the hockey stick box, overdriven gearbox.
Yes.
They were quite a powerful truck and a fast truck in their day.
Yes.
The Shell Company ran a few. Both ones that we had were ex-Shell Company. Burnett's Motors ran them on freight to Ashburton.
They had a lot of tandem drive ones, Burnett's.
Yes, they did, and had them on stock and freight.
Yes. And bulk grain.
There was a few of them around. Sadly, not many.
Little's had a few.
I believe Jared Daldry's got one that's. I chased one on Trade Me, and Jared beat me to it. But it's in quite good order. It's in his collection, and I believe it's going back into Burnett's colours.
Yep, cutting into your one.
I'm going to do ours back in the old Overland colours that we used to run them in, which is a not very attractive brown with a white roof. I'll put it back to the way it was. I'm hoping to have it completed, and the company's 45 years old in September, and I'm hoping to have it completed, and there when we're going to have a bit of a celebration of 45 years, because none of us are sure whether it's still going to be around for 50. so hopefully we'll have it there. I'm sure we will.
What about the team out in the yard, the English import sleeper cab 6B92?
We bought that into the country in I think it was 85 or 86. T&D's brought in 12 of them. They did a raffle draw, Alistair McLaughlin. We went down on a Saturday morning and they had the fleet numbers in a tin. Actually, they were Speight's bottle caps that they took off the top of Speight's stubbies, to be quite honest. And we drew the numbers, the fleet numbers. We drew the one that's out here. It was the fleet spare. When we got it, all we had was a written report, and it said that the compressor was noisy. It's 2022, and the compressor's still noisy.
Good old Detroit.
Yeah, we've never touched it. We ran it on line haul for. It used to deliver whiteware up and down the island for Atlas Appliances.
Yes.
Just was on general duties. Got retired. Left in the corner of the yard. Rusted the roof out. Was in a pretty sad state, really, and one day, boys said, I think that should go to the scrap. I had a rush of the stuff to the brain and went, no, it should go in the workshop. So in the workshop it went, and we got a local sheet metal guy to fabricate a complete new roof for it. And you know, what you see is what you got now.
Yes, neat old truck, isn't it?
No, well, they were a very advanced truck for their day. They had in-cab diesel heaters in them.
Yes.
No aircon, that came a bit later, but you know, for the sleeper bunks and all that sort of this sleeper cab, I mean, they had curtain rails in them, you could close them off and all that sort of thing. In mid-80s, you know, nobody else had even sort of started that, really. And they were very economical, the 92s, compared to, we were running sort of miles per gallon back then still.
Yes.
You can remember getting over 7 miles to the gallon out of that on the whiteware run down the island, which was pretty impressive. It's actually pretty impressive. Short figures even today.
That's right, yeah. What about the RF?
I actually saw it on social media. A guy, Craig Detling had posted this thing, and a chap called Lukey Irwin owned it. It was up in the middle of the Forgotten Highway. I looked at it, and we had an ERF at the time, and I thought this one was a good candidate for a classic truck. Anyway, flew up, saw it. Liked it. We came to what I thought was an exceptionally good deal. One of the guys from here and we went up, a few months later, I think. The poor guy didn't think we were coming for it. Stopped in Stratford, got some batteries and went through to where the truck was, fired it up and drove it home.
Shucks, really?
Turns out it's got a 525 Select in it.
Nice.
We didn't, I didn't realise. Wasn't till our mechanic said, you realise what you've got there. No, and once again, it was stored in a shed up there. The guy was going to use it he bought it, was going to use it for a transporter, but he really, really loves S-lines. Bought it, started to convert it for a transporter tractor unit, found an S-line, poked it in the shed, and that was the end of that. Yeah, once again, those early European trucks, they're really quite impressive compared to some of the other things that are around at the time. The ERFs were sort of the number one truck in their day, really. They were right up there with you. I mean, apart from people that could have a Kenworth or something, the ERFs were probably the pinnacle of the truck in the day.
And pretty good mechanical spec, Cummins Rockwell, Road Ranger and all the rest of it.
Absolutely. Nothing to go wrong with them.
It's a supermarket truck, you can buy parts anywhere.
Very, very similar to a Kenworth, but a cab you'd want to spend different shed, and a cab you'd want to spend all day and not rather than...
And it wouldn't rust.
No rust. No rust. And for someone, and for us bigger fellas, plenty of room.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, so. We'll look forward to seeing the RF out there. What we'll probably do is get some photos of it when it's finished.
Yep.
And try and get some history on it. Try and get some other photos, of what it was when it was new, who had it new, and all the rest of it.
Windsong Transport.
Oh, cool! Another one.
Yeah. No, it was new to Windsong.
Oh, nice. There's one of those in Hanman too.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Right. Well,
it's going to go back into Windsong colours too. So, Clive, much appreciated, and we'll keep tabs on what's going on, and look forward to some progress shots of the OLB and the KM and everything else.
Right. Well, you saw if you're around in the next fortnight or so, I'd say I was talking to the past owner of the OLB last night, and he'll probably be here next week.
Oh, cool. I'll look forward to having a look at that.
Yeah, excellent.
Right. Thanks, Clive.
Righto.
Thank you.
All good.
Thank you, David. That was fascinating, actually. Industry Corner. Let's do the round, starting with Blake Noble, who's an operator, of course, from Transcon.
One topic that's shot to our attention, and I think for me around these changing levels of COVID, which we don't seem to be able to avoid, I think there are two things for industry that just jump out at me. First one is around pragmatism, and I think it's very easy for us to get lost in procedure and protocol and forget that on the most part, a lot of our team do work in some degree of isolation, and that there are things that we can be doing and that we need to actually fight for in terms of that, so that we can uphold what we're doing as much as anything to keep our teams mobile. I know there's the mental health component that gets spoken about, but on the whole, my exposure to it is that people really want to contribute and feel as though they're delivering literally to the cause. So that pragmatism and being practical about steps, I think, is huge. And it links to the second bit for me, which is around integrity of what we're doing. And that's not just the integrity of doing what we're saying we're doing, but actually the integrity of the supply chain that we are a part of. You know, that the flow and effects of us not opting to follow some basic steps has a major flow on effect to so many other sectors, whether it's our own customers or suppliers. We all need to uphold that. And from my perspective, it is about all of us, whether we agree with the overall response of the government and the agencies that we're dealing with or not. We've just got to follow those basics. And there's some steps that we can all be taking, whether we're pro-vaccine, not pro-vaccine, around the use of scanning and masks and just general hygiene and cleanliness. And I think we need to just look long term and just deal with what we can, get on with it, and be done with it.
Have you sorted the logistics for your company in respect to what will happen if you suddenly have people that have to isolate for extended periods?
Yeah, we have, and we've had some broad exposure to this previously. Look, we are doing everything that we can to keep people in isolation as a matter of course now. And I think actually, ironically enough, at the end of last week, we'd already put those plans in place because we could see what was coming. I think it's just reinforcing to everyone that it's not just when you're at work, it's your whole environment, making sure that you are following those basic steps when you're here, there, or anywhere. And yes, look, we do have plans. I think our focus is on the fact that for us, the cab of the truck is an environment that we can actually keep relatively isolated. So in some regards, even if there's some concerns, that to me, there are ways that someone can keep working in isolation. And that's where I say about being pragmatic. We need to, take the approach of that, whether it's someone operating in the cab of a digger, a dump truck, whatever they're doing, those people to me can keep working in some form. We need to find ways of doing that rather than viewing it as a, literal red light, which I just find the most negative connotation that we can. It just, everything grinds to a halt, and that's not how it needs to be, nor how any of us want it to be. So that's where we're at.
Industry Corner, Dave. It's time to talk within the industry now.
Associations, and we did the rounds of the association heads again this month, and of course this month we all came back from holiday to what starts with O, ends in Macron, and everyone's panicking and freaking out about the arrival of the Omicron, and so that was obviously the question we pitched to the association head. So first up this month is James Smith, COO of the National Road Carriers.
Thanks, Dave. Your first point regarding Omicron, I think a blind man riding backwards on a galloping camel could have seen this one coming. Again, that advantage that New Zealand has of because of the moat we have around us. You could see it was happening last year, wasn't it? In Europe and Australia, they were facing Omicron. So there was a reasonable expectation that we'd be prepared for it. So it has come as a bit of a shock that we in fact aren't. So that's caused a bit of angst. I think it's highlighted general unpreparedness of especially Ministry of Health. And then you've got a whole pile of other government agencies that are struggling now to make up for that shortfall. So we're seeing requests now for critical driver lists, critical worker lists coming through from MD. And again, you sit there and go, what is the difference between a critical worker and an essential worker? Because we used to have essential workers, didn't we? And now we've got critical workers. So it would appear that people were struggling with the definition of essential, so they've just changed the name to critical. I don't know how that fixes the problem, but apparently it does. So we're busy supplying Ministry of Transport with critical worker lists in the hope that that's going to, for when we move into the phase 2 approach and phase 3. So the truly observant would have noticed that appears to be very little difference between phase 3 and phase 2, but I'm sure they've kept that there as a surprise for later. So we'll be ready to deal with that. Again, the driver shortage issue you raised with Australia, Australia's just one country that we're going to potentially lose drivers to, and we're going to see that as the world economy reopens. And countries start to open their borders, that everyone's short of drivers. America's short of drivers, Canada's short of drivers, Europe's short of drivers, Australia's short of drivers. And the drivers have always moved in almost like a weather pattern around the globe, haven't they? I mean, we've seen it for decades. We tend to lose them to Australia. Australia tends to lose them to the States, and the States tends to lose them to, and they go in this sort of great circle of life. Now, the critical thing for us at the moment, of course, is we don't have that current of drivers entering our system because our borders are currently shut. So the danger for us is we're going to empty out faster than we can bring them in. Some may be a little bit more cautious about taking the leap offshore, especially given the fact that it may be difficult to get back. You don't know what's happening, global uncertainty, that sort of thing. So. But we are going to see it's not helping our driver shortage, which is why it's even more critical that we look at all sorts of different ways to get people back into our industry. Probably the other thing that is really going to be of importance between now and April, and that all the listeners need to really start thinking about how they want to engage with us and the government, is the review of road user charges. So the government announced that on Friday, that the road user charges is up for review, and the consultation document is fairly comprehensive. It's about 80 odd. Let's just check here. 74 pages of questions and options and different things they want to do or are thinking of doing with road user charges. So, as it's a very significant part of a road transport business, I would strongly suggest that every single operator in the country actually gets engaged, gets hold of us, and puts their 10 cents worth in, because this is one of those ones that once it's locked and loaded, it's going to be with us for some time. So get your thinking caps on, have a natter about it, and then get in touch as to what your concerns are.
Endorse what you say there about the ruck review. We need to have a say on it. We need to all get our voice in on it, because as we've seen with speed limits, it takes a powerful lot of lobbying before there's any sign of this lot changing a pre-intended plan.
That's right. This is going to be yet another one we need volume of submissions, because as we've seen, as you mentioned, speed limit reviews and other things, they want the numbers. So there's no point in us putting in one or two submissions, because we'll be absolutely outnumbered by the cast of thousands that will come in from wanting ruck changes that suit them. So it's volume and quality. We need both.
Yeah, awesome, James. Thanks very much. And a great little comment there on the upcoming road user charges review, which you absolutely must be a part of. You must have a say about that. So get in touch with your associations. And I'm a great believer in power and the strength of numbers behind a body. So if you're not in an association, find one, get in one, stir it up, tell them what you want to say, and be part of that discussion on that review. Second up, Nick Leggett. He is CEO of Ia Ara Aotearoa, Transporting New Zealand. Nick.
Yeah, so Omicron certainly is on its way if it's not sort of in our communities yet. And that's part of the assurance that I think we need to give our transport industry and all the people who work in it, is that the government is equipped and has a plan to be able to deal with Omicron, and that we don't see too many drivers taken out all at once because they're having to test and isolate and obviously fight Omicron if it's caught. And look, the work of Transport in New Zealand in this first couple of weeks of the new year has really been focused around trying to get those assurances from government, talking to transport officials. We are concerned that there appears to be a desire again to try and put a critical status on some businesses and some services. And of course, we've told the Minister very clearly at a meeting last week that we know that the supply chain only works when all freight is able to move, and that's what we should be aiming for. It's difficult to know exactly where they're going to fall. It looks as though that MB will have a registration system for truck drivers and businesses to allow them to operate. We're waiting on details of that. We are keeping, obviously, the industry updated with the information we know. That's on our transporting.nz website. We're giving daily updates on our COVID page there. But it's also those supporting services, Dave, that you will appreciate. Things like if Omicron hits and big swathes of workforce are taken out, that those support services that influence the trucking industry and help us move, like rucks and licensing, COFs, servicing, those services need to keep operating. It's vital. We've also asked the Minister and transporting officials to think about perhaps opportunities where driving times can be a bit more relaxed, and also the potential for some vehicles to perhaps carry a little bit more of a load than they usually do. Because if we are going to be losing drivers to the virus for a period of time, we may have to carry more with less. And I think that more with less is really the critical issue we want to get across to the government. We want our drivers to be as safe as possible. We want them to have access to rapid antigen testing. And of course, the government's taken a lot of that over to be able to sort of direct themselves out of the hands of transport businesses and under the control of government. And that's something we're quite concerned about. But we need to know what the rules are. We need to know what the plan is to give clarity to drivers and to transport operators and everybody working in and around the industry, so they know what the rules are to allow them to keep operating. Now, it's not all bad. I think we're hearing some positive things, but it's just about being clear. So we know the rules and the industry knows the rules.
Yep, excellent, great commentary, and that's right. And interesting you point there. Interesting point you raised there about the vitalness of the service industries too, because big trucks don't move on flat tires and they don't carry spare ones anymore.
This is it. It's all those services, and it's getting assurances that people have got their plans and the government's got their plan, so this stuff can continue to operate. We know that there are going to be fewer staff, and I think that's a big risk. Because, of course, people are going to get knocked over by this. But what we want are really sensible testing and open testing abilities and facilities, and the rules not being too harsh. So you don't have to isolate for 2 weeks, and then if somebody in your family gets, you have to isolate for another 10 days. It's actually why we made a call in the last week to ask those people that hold a heavy vehicle licence. They could be working in any part of the economy at the moment, but if they've driven a truck previously and got experience, can they please put their hand up? And I suspect people watching today will know of people that fit that bill. Can they register and say, yep, prepared to do some shifts, prepared to be a relief driver at some point? Because we've got to think ahead. We can't just sit back as an industry and rely on the government to do everything. We've got to show that we've got some solutions. So I'm really hopeful that look, this is a smart industry, and it's an industry that's used to doing more with less. We just got to channel that and be allowed to make decisions for ourselves and not have the government think that they need to be involved in every aspect, because actually the skills and the expertise sit with drivers on the road and people in transporting companies.
Awesome, Nick. Thanks very much. And a great comment there, and really nice, really good points there about putting pressure back on the government about what they need to do in order to help us shift a lot more goods on fewer trucks in a crisis. And heading to the South Island now for the New Zealand Trucking Association CEO, Dave Boyce.
Yeah, well, certainly welcome, Dave. Good to catch up with you, and certainly welcome to everyone else for 2022. I think it's going to be a interesting year again. Yeah, certainly COVID's continuing to impact on our lives. The latest Omicron, I'll get the pronunciation right, variant is certainly threatening to create havoc. If the experiences of our friends in Australia are anything to go by, we're going to have some major disruption to our industry as people who get infected will need to self-isolate at home. And if this becomes our reality, supply chains will be put under pressure, causing massive disruption. It's important that you have plans in place to minimise the risk to your business, good protocols, practising safe hygiene and social distancing, having masks available for staff and rapid antigen testing kits available to test staff when required. So the labour shortages going forward, we've got a bit of a shortage in our industry and have had for a few years, and it's certainly we're setting up for a perfect storm this year with our counterparts in Australia trying to poach our drivers, but the thing is, as an industry, we need to understand that we are competing in a global market, not just with Australia, but also I've seen the USA looking to try and bring in overseas drivers as well, and even the UK, they're having the same issues. There's certainly a number of overseas businesses actively recruiting in New Zealand at the moment, and some of the wage rates or pay rates that they're offering are very enticing. So as an industry, we need to be looking at that. I know there's been a lot of upward pressure on drivers' wages rates, and I would say as a transport operator, you need to be monitoring and reviewing those constantly. And, it may mean that some of the work that you're doing, if you can't get the rates up, you might be better off to leave it to someone who wants to give it a go. But, it is a tough one. I think it's certainly time for the government to put professional truck drivers back on the immigration skills list. Certainly before the shelves are empty anyway. I mean, the push from government in recent years to try and utilise the untapped workforce resource in New Zealand, I think we've pretty well exhausted that source. I don't think there's too much left that hasn't been sort of tapped into. Other subjects, certainly new capital equipment, including trucks and trailer components, are getting difficult to source, very long order times. Some suppliers have even stopped taking orders. And this is certainly driving up the values of any late model used equipment that may be available. I mean, you've only got to look at the Trade Me pages and there ain't much in the way of late model stuff available. Most of it's pretty old and near the end of its economic life. Some operators are certainly keeping older equipment past its economic life until new equipment becomes available, but this certainly has a cost on viability, and I would say probably on safety as well. So another issue that I think is being handled at the moment, but could have bitten us well and truly, is the diesel exhaust fluid. There's been a tightening of supply, certainly for the urea, which is used as the base for the product. And that's, of course, has driven up the costs. I mean, I think the base urea cost has gone up 400 to 500%. And we're seeing that at the pumps now with the AdBlue or diesel exhaust fluid prices going up, along with diesel fuel. I mean, that's nudging up, and I don't think it'll be long before we see $2 a litre at the retail pumps for diesel. That's a huge increase on what we've been paying. So definitely important that you understand your costs. And certainly if you're struggling with this, give us a call. We do a lot of this cost modelling on that for operators and can help you work out those costs if you're not sure of how to do that. Road maintenance and lack of new roading infrastructure spending continues to be an issue. I believe a whole national strategy around this needs to be revisited, and engagement with our industry is imperative. You only need to talk to a regular line haul operator to find out where the worst bits of the state highway network are. We hear of all the near misses as people make choices on the under-resourced roading network. And I certainly received a reminder of it on Boxing Day, heading away in the caravan for a bit of a Christmas break, and I was only got about 65k out of Christchurch. Went through a pothole and bang, went one of the caravan tyres. So yeah, that was a good start to the holiday. Not,
no, absolutely.
And certainly, as an association, the roading leads into quite a concern we have for safety on the road, with driver training and all that. I believe there needs to be a lot more effort spent on training up the motorists that we share the roads with. Our safety man truck the road safety truck is currently getting refurbished and fitted with the safety T360 virtual reality program, and this is a partnership we've got with the Australian Trucking Association, and we'll be relaunching this in the next few months, so quite exciting times with that, and we'd certainly encourage as many New Zealanders as possible to participate in this hugely successful program. That's probably about all I've got to say, Dave, that's of any importance. I could waffle on all day, I suppose. But
thank you, Dave. Excellent. Plenty to digest in that one as well. Lots of information coming from Dave, again, as last month. And so that's the association heads. I am going to do what I said I was going to do. Omicron sort of hijacked us a wee bit. So if you have a question about the industry you want me to pitch to the association heads, and I'll make it loud and clear now, I'm not going to ambush them. Send me in a question. I'll give them time to give us a response and see what they say. But yep, send in a question, an issue you might have with the industry, and we'll put it to them and see how they respond.
Yeah, Dave needs more emails. Dave.
Yep. I'm gunning for 1,400 a minute.
So that's it, boys, for another month. If you like what you hear, give us a good rating wherever you're listening to this podcast. Review the podcast. Even if you don't like it, please rate us well. So what can we expect next month, boys? What's on the cards? Have you got the feature interview ready for next month yet, Dave?
Yes, I've got the feature interview sort of lining up there in the background, but I'm not going to give too much away because I want people to tune in with anticipation. But there is just so much in New Zealand that you can do feature interviews on. It's insane.
Well, see you, fellas.
Yeah. See you later, Muzzy.
Kirk, Body,
Blurk, whatever. And go to page 98.
Oh, page 98.
New Zealand Trucking Magazine, the original voice of the New Zealand trucker.